Background's gonna look a little different because I'm presenting from the gym today because I didn't really think about the fact that my wife scheduled demolition on a bathroom that borders my office at the house. So jumped over here. So, but audio sounds good?
Yeah, that's good today.
Awesome. So what we're gonna do, obviously, week one, we went over like the intake, conversation, assessment. Week two, week one was the intro stuff. Last week we went over intake, assessment, the personal orientation, all that fun stuff. Now we're finally going to get into program design. So what I want to do, one, share my screen. You got that full screen?
I do.
Awesome. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're on to step 3 now, getting into program design. I'm gonna go through this very methodically, but off to my left here, I made a note on the whiteboard to be clear about something. And like, we've done the program design product. I've presented a million times. But one of the things that I wanted to start off this one with, we've got our 3 overarching goals. We're talking about everything is about consistency, crush goals, have fun doing it, competency, and independence. And I wanted to introduce our sheet. And what I'm going to do is walk through kind of top down. What's here? I kind of did this in week 1, but what's here? We're definitely going to get into how we've gotten all this information. It's from the intake process that we've already gone over. But the big thing being that as I say, okay, we're going to talk about selecting reps for power, for strength, assistance. Then I'm going to talk about RPE, and then we're going to talk about how many sets, and then we'll get into conditioning today. And then next week we'll get into selecting exercises. But I don't want anyone to look at this and think, well, how are you making those decisions if you don't know what exercises you're going to use? All of this kind of happens concurrently, right? But for presentation purpose, I can't be like, all right, so we're going to select this exercise, and here's how we're going to select reps, here's how we're going to select, number of sets and RP and all that. But it does kind of all happen at the same time, but we start with like a global thought process like I'm about to present. So
cool, I understand.
Awesome. So that being said, like if I say anything today that throws you off or you have more questions about, just like the other weeks, like don't be afraid to interrupt me. Just literally talk over me. I'll stop, go back. I want to make sure that it's as clear as it can possibly be. So looking at the sheet, here's what we're going to do is go top down. We've got the client's name up top, what block we're in, what phase we're in, and then what's highlighted is the current repetitions that we're using for power, for strength, and assistance. And then to the right of that, that's not highlighted, we have the second phase, the third phase, and the fourth phase. So depending on the consistency that someone's training in our facility, if they're training 2 days a week, they're going to be on this program that we're going to walk through here for 6 weeks, because in the middle, we have this workout dates, the key, it's 12 sessions. So 2 days a week, 6 weeks. If they're training 3 days a week, it's going to take 4 weeks to get through. So 4 to 6 weeks if someone's perfectly consistent on this program. Jumping back up just to the top below that, we've got the goals. And the big thing here is making sure that the information that we got from the intake with someone, in the past, I used to like paraphrase their goals and put them up there, but we're potentially doing a big disservice because someone might say, and I know I said this last week, but I don't think I can say it enough. Someone might say words that we wouldn't use, like tone up my belly, right? Like I have the one here actually, build muscle and improve overall body shape, and then parentheses, lose belly. Like I would never state that way, but that's literally what this person wrote, plus improved throwing so we can rec some fools and kickball. I will say that I did change it to rec some fools and kickball. So sometimes we'll put like a humor thing in there where it's like, but as long as it doesn't detract from the wording that they use about what it is that they actually want to accomplish. So if someone says, lose weight, don't write lean up. If some, you know what I mean? Like take the exact language. And then the second part with that is because you have their exact language there, when you're actually communicating with them on the floor as you deliver this program and coach them, refer to that and use that language when you're explaining to them why they're doing something, so that there's that connection the whole time between, oh, okay, this truly is an individualized approach. Then below that, we have their FMS concerns in there. And that's really for us. I'll talk later about why I don't want our clients to get hung up on those scores for the FMS, but it's a big awareness piece for us. And I keep that information at the top of the program for two reasons. One, obvious one, is how it's going to impact the program from an exercise selection standpoint, from application of mobility and motor control work that we may be giving them. And then two, because as you'll see on the key, the 6th and the 12th workout are in red and they say FMS me. And that's because we're going to recheck at least that top one on the 6th and the 12th session. But depending on, time's sake, we might check all three of those at the 6th and 12th session. Or maybe we check shoulder mobility at the 6th session, and then we check shoulder mobility, trunk stability push-up, and deep squat at the 12th session. But the big thing is that we do want to come back around. Common mistake we see sometimes, and I've been guilty of this in the past, is intake someone or FMS someone, whatever, replace that with whatever assessment you use. Assess someone on intake, and then you don't go back and actually use it again. Even bring it to like the law enforcement group we work with. When I came in and said we were going to use the FMS, there was kind of some grumbling of like, oh, here we go. And I'm like, whoa, like, what's the issue? What's the problem with the FMS? And guys were like, well, the last person was here, also used the FMS. I'm like, okay, again, what's the problem? And they were like, she made us all, get together and spend all this time, guys lined up and going through it. And then she turned around and she handed all of us the same exact program. And we never did it again until like a year later when, okay, we got to do this thing. And it's like, we're going to get FMS again. And then we still got the same program. So it was just a waste of time the way that it was approached. I was like, oh, cool. Like, we're going to use it entirely different. So that's why we have that there.
Cool.
And then going below that, we've got what workout this is. So I'll scroll down because we've got workout A and we've got workout B. Now, for the purpose of this presentation, I'm going to really walk us through this A-B approach, but I don't want anyone either on the call now or watching the replay to think all that they ever use is an A-B-A, B-A-B approach. Not true. The goal is to give our clients whatever it is they need, and it's also going to be based around the number of days they're training. But when people are starting out, we give them less. Less is absolutely more, in most circumstances, but especially in the beginning, we don't start people out with an A, B, C approach for two real big reasons. One, most of our clients are only going to train 2 days a week. So an ABC approach wouldn't even make sense. 2 days a week of strength training. They might come in for a conditioning class on top of that. And the second reason is that, where this one, there's 3, 6, 8, 9 different exercises on each day. There's some overlap, but let's just say, each day there's 9 things to either learn or be reminded of, right? If I add a third day to the mix, now we're taking it from 18 things to potentially 27 things. That's a lot for someone to figure out. So I'd rather start with this ABA, BAB approach, where someone can build a high level of competency, going back to that, consistency, crush goals, have fun doing it, competency and independence. That's where this approach really comes from and why we do that. That being said, sometimes we break the rule and we start people with an ABC, and we have a very rare few in our gym who train more days a week and get a program that looks more like, for anyone that's familiar with the Strength Faction program, like A, B, C, D, E. I think we have maybe 3 or 4 people in our gym that are on a setup like that right now. But we could make this crazy and talk about all this, if this, then that. But to keep things simple, what we're going to do is we're going to walk through this A-B approach. And then if you guys would like, next week, I can show you some like case study type stuff, and we can look at A, B, C, A, B, C, D. And even after next week's presentation, that's not the end. If you guys still have questions, post away in the Facebook group, or if you're just looking at the archives, like shoot me an email. I'm happy to share whatever I need to share to help make this all make sense. So exercises off to the left. Each color column, the blue, the pink, the green, the purple, it's just going to have the number of sets, the number of reps, and what session number. So where you see like 1/3, 5, 7/9, 11, those are the session numbers. Over from that, we've got the RPE, the rating of perceived exertion. We're going to talk about that today. Then the only other thing really to point out on here at the top where it says workout A and workout B, there are loading types broken down. So where it says P equals straight sets, S equals straight sets, A equals straight sets, it stands for power, strength, assistance again. And then C equals distance here on workout B, C stands for conditioning. And so we're just writing what type of loading types we're using right now. And that will come in at the end of next week. We'll break down what that's all about and how that keeps us how that keeps our clients engaged and also gives us appropriate variety so that people can still train hard on the basics but not get bored out of their mind. So, and last but not least, we've got the cool down at the bottom. Today, we're going to spend pretty much all of our time talking about selecting repetitions, the number of sets that we're going to use, and programming. So, and then of course what I just talked about, kind of glanced over, power, strength, assistance, conditioning, like how we have gray, then white, then gray, then white. 99% of the time, our programs are going to look like that, right? And the 2 days are going to be complementary, and then that cool down there at the bottom. But sometimes, as I'll show later, like we'll ditch the assistance section and we'll spend more time doing conditioning, or like, you know, maybe we'll just drop conditioning off altogether and only have them do assistance if we know that, you know, maybe they're like a runner that's coming in here, no point in having them do a ton more conditioning. But generally, that's a pretty full program there. Most of our clients are probably going to start off with power, strength, and conditioning. And then as their competency goes up, then we start to add in assistance and include more volume that way. Last thing, kind of the last thing before we jump into selecting reps. This is what we put together as our checklist. So everything I just talked about, like in introducing that sheet, the name, we're going to talk in a minute about why you want to have in mind when you're meeting with someone, who does this person remind me of? Their goals are on there. We've pre-selected their reps for the block. We have their FMS and other assessment notes, other concerns and notes, number of training days, that's in that key. We want to keep the neurometabolic continuum in mind, and we're going to talk about that a little bit today. The movements, obviously, we want to have those on there, how many sets they're going to do. And it doesn't have to be like a prescribed this many sets. It could be sometimes we'll give like, hey, 2 to 4 sets of this, like that's okay. And we can talk about when and why that would be appropriate. Loading types, we just talked about that a little bit. Rating of perceived exertion, conditioning, and cool down. So all of that stuff is on our sheet. So we put together this checklist as something to take a glance at before you actually sit down to go all in on writing the program. Do you have an answer to the questions that are on there, or you have the information that you need to be able to make choices in these things? If not, you got to go back and get a little bit more information before you waste your time staring at the screen like, I don't know what to give them. So this will keep that from happening. So keep the checklist in mind for that. As for how this information impacts the program, both from the checklist and where we got this information, we got it from our one-on-one assessment goal setting session and the personal orientation session, right? And things like, who do you remind me of? Someone gets it. I actually did this in Toronto a couple weeks back, more than a couple weeks back. And people were asking who that guy was. And I was like, holy cow, I don't know. Like, it's like, and someone was like, is it Justin Timberlake? I don't know how old that picture is, but people
You're old,
don't recognize it. What's that?
I said, I guess you're old.
Yeah, I don't know. Does that make me old? No, like, but he's still current. Like,
is he?
I guess it's that I know that Justin Timberlake.
Yeah. Not the Chris Stapleton Justin Timberlake.
Yeah.
He's not
So
still
that cracked
current.
me up. I was like, man, that joke just went right over everybody's head. So, but as for why we start with who does this person remind me of? When I was in that stage where I was really stressed out and spending ridiculous amounts of time in writing programs, I used to sit down, and even if I wasn't starting from scratch, I would open a program and I would feel like I needed to change every single thing on that program, or else it wasn't individualized. It was someone else's program tailored to this person. But at the end of the day, that is individualized programming. We open a proven process, a proven path that's worked for someone else before, whether that be like a detailed template or an exact program, and we make the minimum amount of changes that we need to make for it to make sense for the person that we have in front of us. And that's okay. To the point where even, you know, today we've had so many people come through our gym that my favorite time is when I can open someone else's program and just change it to the new person's name, the new person's goals, and their FMS intake notes, whatever needs change there. And then I look at the program, I'm like, pretty much good to go. You know, as little change needed as possible. And don't feel guilty. You're not doing your clients a disservice by doing that, as long as you genuinely do think they're still good decisions for the person that you have in front of you. So super duper efficiency tip. We keep all of our programs in Dropbox. So even if I'm out and about, you know, I've got it on my phone, I've got it on all of my computers. So it hasn't happened in a long time, but you know, there were times where I'd find myself in a bind and be like, oh crap. And with Dropbox, I can still open it wherever I'm at, pause, like update things. And but the biggest benefit to this is that every single program since switching over to Dropbox in probably 2013, every single program that we have ever written is in one central place. It's not on a hard drive somewhere that if that computer crashes, it's all gone. And we have all of these programs that we can tap back into whenever a new person reminds us of someone else. And that being said, some of you are newer to training or new to following programming like this. When you only have one program, that's the one program that you're going to modify as little as possible for every single person, right? Don't think that you need a huge Rolodex of clients to make this work, because even though I just said we have all these programs, I probably go back and use the last, number one, I have like 3 different starting sort of templates that we use at this point. And I really just go back and think of, like, you can only remember so many people's detailed program. So I probably go back into the last half dozen, maybe a dozen tops people to work off of one of their programs, because we update our system, even in small ways, we update our system so often that if I pull up a program from a year ago, I know there's already gonna be things on there, terminology, maybe some type of a layout on the sheet that has changed. So don't feel like you have to have a huge Rolodex of clients to do this. Just, you got one, cool. That one is the one that you're going to use to work off of everybody's. And the biggest thing that this is stopping is, it's okay if you feel like you need to, like if it's just the way that your brain works, but I've seen so many people in workshops that we've hosted come in, and whenever we do the drill, meet your new client, they're writing in a notebook. And so I make a point to say, hey, do you always start off writing the program in a notebook and then you transfer it to the computer? And many a time people are like, yes. Okay, why? And like, I haven't really gotten a great reason why. It's just, well, it's just the way that I've always done it. And sure, maybe you need to get like some ideas on paper, but once you start to get, it could be that you have so many different types of clients, right? There's a lot of reasons why that may be, but for us, we are pretty clear on our target market. And so when someone comes in, that's why I'm saying I kind of have those 3 common starting templates that I use. And we'll talk about what those are a little bit later on. But we don't need to go crazy and start off on notebook with a blank slate and staring at it, open something else and work off of it and save time. This is, yeah, this is where we're going to make those changes at the very top. Make sure at minimum we're changing their name. We're putting the new person's goals in, like I said earlier, in the exact terminology that they use, putting their FMS concerns in there, any other concerns. And then, you know, if we do, for some reason, want to change the repetition scheme for power, strength, and assistance, and that's what we're going to talk about now. So training equals intent. I honestly do not remember if we talked about this in the last 2 weeks, but it's something that I started out saying a ton, and now it's become really the foundation of like the entire presentation. And every time we're making a decision, it comes back to the question, well, what's your intent? So when it comes to even just training and selecting repetitions, selecting the number of sets we're going to do, selecting the exercises we're going to use, it always, always, always comes back to intent, right? So every time you're sitting down and feeling like, I don't know what to give this person. Well, maybe it's a question like, what part of the program are we at? If you're following ours where it's power, strength, assistance, conditioning, what's your intent there? Oh, it's power. Okay. Well, talk me through that. It's strength. Talk me through that. And so we're going to use that as the basis as we go through and talk about this application to power, strength, and assistance. The other thing is rating of perceived exertion. And we even made a change on this in the last, was that last week, 2 weeks ago? All the weeks start to run together. But rating of perceived exertion is, there's a Borg scale, which I think is like 8. I think it's Borg. Someone's going to, anyone know? Am I right on that?
Like 6 to 20?
6 to 20, 8 to 16, I don't even know. But like the fact that we're all like, what is that one again? That is such a weird, number one, just selection of numbers to pick from. So we keep it real simple with a 1 to 10. But really, I could say we keep it even simpler, and ours stay between 5 to 10. I don't know who uses 1 to 4 and what that would be used for. But intent matters, bringing it back to what I was saying before. Power, strength, conditioning, right? So if I was going to give someone a barbell front squat, RPE 7, right? Everyone in their head probably has an idea of what that would mean in their system. In our system, it would mean that they have about 3 quality reps left in the tank. 3 quality reps left in the tank. That doesn't mean failure, but 3 reps before technical failure would even begin. So that would be a strength, like some type of a strength, assistance, resistance training application. But what if I said RPE 7 for the kettlebell swing, right? Well, now is it 3 quality reps left in the tank? Well, what's your intent? Your intent on that kettlebell swing is velocity, right? An effort to create that velocity. So it would still be the same. It would be 3 quality reps left in the tank, but the quality that we're chasing is velocity at the same effort level, right? So it does become very subjective for our clients. And so a common question that we get is, well, how hard is this to teach your clients? Not as hard as we all want to make it in our head. And the biggest thing that we run into, you get people who go too hard, and you can see that, right? You're like, there's no way that person had 3 quality reps left in the tank. Or, man, the form on that kettlebell swing really, even though it was still moving just as fast, they started leaning back like crazy, and they were starting to steal that power from subpar form, right? And then the one that we made the most recent change to is conditioning. And say that I was going to give someone a circuit of like sled push, and then they were going to do maybe like speed push-ups, and then whatever, right? Well, that sled push, okay, for weight selection, we could put an RPE on that, right? And then for the speed push-up, well, we could, right? We could say so many quality reps left in the tank, but it starts to get confusing. Do we put multiple things under each? And just maybe 2 weeks ago, we made the decision to say, we're changing our conditioning to effort, right? Like how, like more of a subjective, like how hard was that and how hard should you be going? So all that being said, I'm not saying that you guys have to use exactly what I just said. I'm not gonna say on anything, but I do want people to be thinking about it instead of just like slapping down RPEs on things. Go through and define what those RPEs are going to mean for you. And the other thing, I think it's on here, yeah, what about body weight? Right? So we used to not put an RPE on anything body weight. And now it kind of falls under the annoying answer of, well, it depends. A push-up? Sure, right? Especially because most of our clients are not starting out being able to do great push-ups for volume from the floor. So we're probably going to do a modified push-up in the rack with a barbell elevated, right? Well, now I can help them, and the coaches, whoever's going to be, making that decision depending on their experience level, I can say RPE 7, 3 quality reps left in the tank, and that's going to help them to determine how high or low that bar should be set, right? An inverted row, same thing. What angle they should be for that inverted row. Or even something like they're strong and they can do push-ups from the floor, and I give them a certain number of reps with an RPE. Now they can look at it and say, oh, all right, well, I can add external load with a weight vest, or I could change the tempo. All the ways that we could make body weight movements easier or harder. So we do still use RPEs there. The only times we really don't, definitely not on any kind of like mobility stuff. Today may change, but as of today, we don't on that. Something like a traditional like glute bridge, because more often than not, if we're using a glute bridge or like a Cook hip lift, it's more of a it's all training, right? I'm trying to come up with the words here, but It's more teaching people to do something versus like training to a certain
Like
level of fatigue on that.
motor control, mindful kind of movement.
Yeah. So for that, we're not having them chase a certain level of fatigue or exhaustion on that. So it just doesn't really seem to make sense there. So now bringing that to power training, right? Well, here's what, when I was in college, and anyone that came into this program through the page that we put together that kind of gave my backstory, I sat in college listening to things like this: Essentials of Strength Conditioning, 2nd edition, Power, precisely defined as the time rate of doing work, where work is the product of the force exerted on an object and the distance the object moves, in the direction in which the force is exerted, right? Like all this stuff where you're just like scratching your eyes out, you memorize it, then you have to go take the test, and cool. What the hell does that mean when I actually go to train someone, right? Well, it's all about intent. And we're going to talk about like more things that the NSCA teaches us. But at the end of the day, when it comes to power for us in the gym, yeah, that definition is cool and all, but it comes back to intent. The intent to put a hole in the wall with our medicine ball throw, the intent to fly through the ceiling when we jump, and how we transfer that in our coaching and communication to the clients, as well as how we apply that intent to, well, how many sets and reps should we be doing? So knowing that, what types of exercises would we use for power? You can answer.
Like a med ball throw.
Yeah, so med ball throws, kettlebells, you can do body weight stuff, right? So put together a huge list here, not an all-encompassing list. Some things on here may confuse you and say, how in the world are you using Indian clubs for power? Not something we're going to go into in this presentation, but if you've never seen it, Gray Cook, I'm certain there's YouTube videos out there, has some really awesome two drills, a slam with Indian clubs. You're not really letting go of them. And what he calls, I think he calls it a snatch, but it really just teaches people, like instantly teaches people the form to do the proper like hinging mechanics on a kettlebell swing using Indian clubs. So that's where we'll sometimes use it for that. But med ball throws and slams, landing and jumps, Indian clubs, kettlebell ballistics, sandbags, sprints, loaded and unloaded. And I don't mean like loaded with a like parachute or anything, but you know, sleds and like ski erg sprints, airdyne bike sprints, rower sprints, speed lifts, agility work. And often someone's like, well, you don't have Olympic lifting on there. Yes, Olympic lifting would be power. Really, this is all built around what we mostly do in our facility. That being said, we do have a select few clients who do components of Olympic lifting. And yes, that would fall into this category. So bringing it back to what I learned in college, and this is the stuff that, you know, I come out, I get my first client and I'm like, all right, how does this apply? 3 to 5 sets, 3 to 5 reps at 75 to 85% of 1 rep max for a multiple effort event, 1 to 2 reps at 80 to 90% 1 rep max for single effort event, right? So you have these exact, well, like this range of sets, this range of reps, range of intensity. Okay, so let's just remember 3 to 5 sets, 3 to 5 reps at 75 to 85% of 1 rep max for multiple effort event. Let's go back, I don't know, we're gonna do med ball throws. All right, med ball throw, what's their 1 rep max? Crap, can't do it. All right, fine. Kettlebell swing, what's their 1 rep max? No, we don't have 1 RM? I guess we gotta go test 1 RM on that. We're gonna do, you know, sandbag, same thing. You guys get the point, right? So everything that we're learning there, there's value in that. We can break that down and we can say, okay, well, that range allows people to be, you know, so fast with it, intent, right? And we have to understand that this stuff is all done in labs where they can control for every variable. And it's all built around athletes and weightlifters. And I believe it was probably all done with like barbells. I'm not certain about that, but it's definitely not made for med ball throws and what we most commonly apply as power training. If we were training weightlifters, sure, our power training would be Olympic lifting. But like I just said, that doesn't apply to most of our clients. So this isn't really that helpful. So we're gonna crumple it up. When it comes to reps, how many reps would you program for power work, right? We can keep that in mind. Maybe we agree with this. Maybe we say, well, 3 to 5 reps. Sure, could say that. But you could also say something else. And as long as you had a why that was applied towards that intent of it being power, because now, again, that 3 to 5 reps, there's probably something to do with the types of people they were testing in the lab there. What rating of perceived exertion, right? Well, could be a range, but it's not probably going to be 10, especially with Gen Pop clients. So for us, again, not saying this is a prescriptive answer and everyone should run out and only use between 2 to 8 reps at an RP of 5 to 7, but that's most commonly what we use. Do we break the rules here and sometimes give people 10 reps on power? Sure, right? But we'll have a why. We'll keep that why in mind when we go to select exercises for something including 10 reps, right? Like, are we going to do broad jump for 10 reps? Probably not, because I don't know anyone that's going to be able to put maximum force into the ground and do a max distance broad jump for 10 reps in a row over and over and still not lose, that quality, right? But something like a med ball throw for 10 reps, possibly, as long as you have a why and it applies to the intent, cool. Same thing with rating of perceived exertion. Most of ours are going to be between 5 to 7. And on 5, we're not like, oh, they would have 5 quality reps left in the tank. That's just going to be like max velocity with minimal effort, right? And then working our way through that. But have a why, put it to it, have people go do it, and adjust as needed. Don't overthink this stuff. And power's going to go here, right? The only thing that isn't on here, but we talked about it last week, it's not on our program sheet, because it is, and I'm pointing past the computer, like you guys can see what I'm doing, because it's on a board, multiple of them actually, on boards out on our area of the turf where people do their warm-ups, are the warm-ups. So the warm-ups are not on the programming sheet. But I'm just saying that real quick because I'm like, oh, power is the first real thing on here. Some of you, if you don't have that common area where people are doing warm-ups and it's all on the sheet, you may want to have warm-ups at the top of your sheet. But for us, first thing on each day is going to be power. Now, instead of just doing that power movement and then resting, we go ahead and we maximize our time and we do 2 other things at this time. We drop in a core drill here, and I'll expand on that a little bit in a second based on a really good question that I got recently, and a mobility drill after that that's based on priority from the FMS or injury history or whatever we know about that person.
Chris, can I stop you real quick and ask a question?
Yeah, go for it.
My understanding of like why you put power initially is like, you want a neurological system firing as quickly as possible, and you don't want the the energy system that you're going to use for power depleted. What about if you have like an athlete or someone who needs power like after they do a long endurance activity? You
Absolutely.
know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Joe Ken's tier system.
Okay, so how do you program that differently, or do you program that differently if that's going to be their demand? Like someone goes and does a long endurance activity and then needs to be explosive after that?
Yeah, there's a number of ways that we could do it. Are you familiar with the tier system by Joe Ken?
I'm familiar just barely with Joe Ken, but something I could probably look up.
So basically, and I'm probably going to butcher this, so if there's like a big Joe Ken advocate on this and I screwed up, I apologize, but I can give you the generality of it. We don't really use it. We do to an extent, and it would be a question for Todd if you jump into the coaching stuff that he'd be able to hammer as well. But basically, he has total body, lower body, and upper body, right? And so say that they're going to do a 3-day training split. They'll do total, lower, upper, all on the same day. They'll do their total body stuff first, then their lower body stuff, then their upper body stuff.
Oh, shoot. Pros.
Do upper body, they're just taking the bottom and moving it to the top. Or the second training day is going to go upper body, then total body, then lower body. Make sense? Am I coming in clear? Because it just said my internet's unstable.
Yeah, it froze just a little bit. I got the initial description of total, lower, and upper, and then I missed after that.
Okay. So day 1, total body, lower body, upper body. Day 2 is going to be take the bottom and move it to the top. So now it's upper body, total body, lower body, right? Now day 3, you're going to take the bottom and move it to the top, and it's going to be upper body, lower body, total. Make sense?
Okay. Yeah.
And for him, that total is going to be a power-based movement.
Okay.
But they're not, even most people from like a neural metabolic standpoint, and if like we're going to talk about it a little bit more later, but but neurological would be why we start power first. It's more like CNS based. It's explosive, right? More of their neurological stuff is going to be in that total body, like power based movements. But then their lower body, we're going to have more systemic load with lower body, right? Because we're going to load our full body with that, but that's going to be like our squats, our deadlifts, things like that. So that's still going to be higher on the neurological end of things. And then the upper body is where they're going to build in more volume. So now we're getting into more like metabolic. You with me?
Yep.
And so by rotating those, now they've pre-fatigued, TLU. By day 3, they're doing, oh man, this is so hard to do without looking at it. Upper body, then lower body, then total
eventually
body,
you
right?
end up with the total at the end. And
Exactly.
so they're doing power post-fatigue. So you're getting that in the nature of the programming. I got it. That's cool.
Yep. So there's a number of approaches that you could use. So many like athletic-based coaches that I'm friends with and I've seen run facilities really, really well, or even in like the collegiate setting, are using Joe Ken's approach. And there's more to it than that, because then he throws in other stuff to it as well. But one, there's a book on it.
Okay.
I think it's just called Joe Ken's Tier System. Just look up Joe Ken like on Amazon. And there's a completely, and I'm going to add this to the whiteboard as something that I'll post this week. There's a completely free talk that he did that was one of the biggest influences. I'm actually going to talk about it in a minute here in one of the slides, called like macros, micros, and mesos. It was an NSCA speech that he did. I'll post it. I'm going to write that real quick.
Okay.
And I've always had like the thing that I just did where I put up the NSCA and I'm like, well, that's not helpful. And I crumple it up and it kind of falls off the screen. Joe Ken was, a CSCS and all these things. And he got like blacklisted from any NSCA events because of what we're talking about. Like, no, you train power first, then you do this. I'm still kind of following like the NSCA approach there. But then I'm also poo-pooing on a lot of it because the application of what we're actually talking about is for general population, right?
Yeah.
We still do similar things with like our law enforcement and like performance-based guys, but for the most part, we're talking about general population here. And when I talk about like the sets and reps and stuff, I crumple theirs up, I throw it away. Well, Joe Ken was doing the same thing. And they literally, I don't know like what the context was, where they were, but someone higher up with the NSCA called him out. And he was like, well, why can't I do it that way? And he talks about it in the presentation that I'll post, but they said, they were like, that's not how you train weightlifters. And he was like, oh, perfect. We agree. I'm not training weightlifters. I'm training athletes.
And football players. Yeah.
And then they blacklisted him. And basically it was like, you're no longer associated with the NSCA. And then I just said, you have to go watch the speech that he did for the NSCA. What's really cool is I don't know if it was like a change in leadership or whatever, but ultimately they came back around full circle and they were like, no, this makes perfect sense. So much so that they've had him come back in more of like a leadership role and be a part of, their educating. So pretty cool. But
yeah.
Thank
you. That's super helpful.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right. So jumping into strength. So we're going to go through kind of the same thing, right? We have to talk about intent first. So where intent with power training was velocity, there's one thing that I could say to go back on that. Like it might not be velocity, it might be controlling velocity, right? So what I'm getting at with that is like a common question we get is, so you do power with every single person that you train? Yes. There may be some type of a reason where someone was referred over from physical therapy and they're not really given the clearance yet to do most things. So maybe, there's no definites, there's no absolutes in saying we always do it no matter what. There are some occasional times where we omit power training as we traditionally do it from programming for a little bit for somebody. But for the most part, we do it with every single person. But it may be, and it was on like the list of options, it may be landing, right? It might be just having someone start, up on their toes, arms overhead, and do like a snap down and learn to control like landing before they actually jump in the air and land, right? Or even like when we're doing medicine ball throws, it might be standing with our feet bilaterally and doing an overhead throw And a progression from that could be to have to control deceleration even more to turn it into like overhead medicine ball throw with a step. And now they're stepping forward and they're loading into a split stance, right? So it's not always about the production. It's also about being able to control the deceleration of that. And sometimes just the deceleration component is power training for our Gen Pop clients. So bringing that back to strength training, intent. Simply stated, intent to incrementally add weight to compound movements, right? We could make the argument that, well, I could get strong with my bicep curls, right? And that's not a compound movement. You could, but we're going to talk about assistance training later. And my response is that that's probably going to wind up under our assistance training. Exercises for strength. We want to get someone strong. What are we doing?
Squat, deadlift, row, push.
Squats, deadlifts, presses, rows. Pretty much said the same thing. So typically heavier bilateral lifts, but unilateral work can have a place here too. You know what? I just realized something and I want to go back because here I was like, I had a really good conversation on this recently. And with your question, I skipped one thing and I want to go back right here. Core. I left this out and I definitely want to go back. Recently, one of our interns, after leaving, I don't know why he didn't ask me when he was here. He's like, dude, I thought of a few questions after leaving that I wanted some clarity on. One is a strength question I'm going to answer in a second. But one of them, another one was about core training and why we do it earlier. He's like, dude, prior to coming to intern with you guys, I'd never seen someone do core work early in the session. He's like, because the way that I was taught is that by pre-fatiguing someone's core and then going and asking them to do heavier compound movements, like, isn't there a higher risk for injury there? And I was like, yeah, if we're approaching it, you know, with what I'm guessing is more of a traditional, like we're trying to hammer their core. We are not trying to hammer people's core with our application of core training, right? So we'll talk about it when it comes to exercise selection, but just thematically, I want to say what we're really doing here is we want to find the level of where someone has control basically of their pelvis and their ribs, right? And we're not breaking it down. No one's trying to control their pelvis and their ribs, but someone's able to maintain a tall and tight position, but they're on the cusp of it actually being a little bit of a challenge. And now whether that just be hold that position statically and learn to breathe, or it be hold that position and there's some type of dynamic movement, dead bugs, right? And still be able to breathe. But we're not taking them to the point where we never are, but where we're like chasing the burn or we're trying to fatigue their core. If anything, it's enhancing to our compound movements to come because we're taking the time to reinforce good posture and train movement on good posture. So we're not going near, right? Like RPE, whatever that exercise is, I just have the word core there. RPE 6 on both days, 6 to 7 on the second day. So nowhere near taking someone to extreme fatigue. We're really just reinforcing posture and motor control on that. So I definitely wanted to mention that real quick.
Okay, so basically you're just giving them like a reference point for the position so that then when they get into the strength and the more taxing stuff, you can just refer back to, hey, remember the position from core, and that's going to keep things more stable. And they have a mental framework for basically good posture in the exercise.
Exactly. So think of, I don't know why I just said think of. That's what threw me off. I'm like, well, think of what? That's what he's saying. The way that we approach it, and it's not always. There are times where, and I think actually in the program that we're going to be looking at, like I break the rule here, but most of the time, workout A, doesn't matter which one is on which day, they might get flipped. But one day, say workout A is going to be prone core, the other day is going to be supine. But it's going to start off, depending on the person's experience level, they may skip steps here, but it's going to start off more static and just learning to feel, find and feel the position and breathe. And then as their competency, right, we talk about competency and independence, that third part we're always after, as their competency with being able to breathe and control that position improves, now we can start to add dynamic movement to it. So it might be that they're starting off in like a forearm plank. Okay, show me tall and tight. They can do that. They're really reaching through their upper back. Everything's good. okay, well, now how could I challenge that with movement? It could be as simple as like lift and reach one arm. It could be we bring them up to a push-up position plank and we do shoulder taps. It could be that we stay on the forearms and we do a body saw, right? Like the list could be endless. But again, we're not chasing fatigue. Now we're just training their ability to maintain that tall and tight posture and challenge it. And that would be a bunch of prone examples. We could do the same thing for supine. We're lying on our back. You know, maybe it's a static dead bug. The arms are up, the hips, the knees, and the ankles are all bent 90 degrees. Maybe we start by reaching one limb at a time, right? All right, now opposite arm, opposite leg. We could turn that into like a rolling pattern, like a roll and reach. Take that to a quarter get up to, you know, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, but again, it's always just layering on top of the skill that that they currently have with ease, and just finding a little bit of challenge and building on it to teach them. So, cool. So now bringing it back to what I was saying here, typically heavier bilateral lifts, but unilateral work can have a place here too. And same intern, another question that was in that email, he had said, why during your personal orientation session and in pretty much every single client that trains at your gym, do you start people off with, depending on where they're at on the spectrum, but most of our clients are going to start off with a goblet squat and a kettlebell deadlift. He's like, why are you starting them off? And even once they pass that in our spectrum, like the goblet squat is usually going to go on to a Zercher or a safety bar squat. The kettlebell deadlift is going to go to a barbell RDL. Why aren't you taking them or even starting them unilateral? Because we know that, you know, and this, I'm misquoting him, I'm sure, like from the exact verbiage that he used, but he's like, when we know that starting people unilaterally is less spinal load and basically like the whole like Mike Boyle approach. And I don't remember exactly what my reply was to that, but I brought it back to the competency and independence piece. For most people, Mike's working with a lot more athletes where the load is that much higher. Most of our clients aren't really using that much load, especially from day one. It's purely a competency thing. And teaching someone to control a goblet squat and teaching someone to be able to do a bilateral deadlift, especially that kettlebell deadlift where the load is directly between their feet, is safe and easy to do. Now, we do break the rule sometimes, and if someone doesn't have it, they're not going to be goblet squatting from day one, and they may wind up doing some type of a unilateral movement. We always take it from like an individualized, it depends, you know, approach, right? But starting people off bilaterally is, especially like, let's look at the deadlift. The base level of competency on 2 feet with a bilateral deadlift, like the rule in our gym is show me you can do that, then I'll let you do a single leg RDL. I have never seen a client who, I don't know, I guess I could be correct on this, but I can't think of a single client who could not show me a good deadlift on 2 feet, but then could go do a good deadlift on 1 leg, right? It just doesn't happen. So we want to see people develop that base level of competency on 2, and then we open the door to 1. Once someone has a higher level of movement competency, sure, go ahead, go nuts and say, well, you know, we start people off and load the hell out of them with rear foot elevated split squats like Boyle. Plus, understand that, I don't know the exact numbers, but if I understand correctly, I think like 400 people a day move through Boyle's facility. They need, you know, very defined systems and choice just for sheer volume that they have going through. Plus, you know, everyone's got like the thing that based on their system makes sense for their system. That's what makes sense for their system. And the way that we have everything set up and the way that we're going to layer introduction of new movements, ours is just based off of competency on 2 before challenging on 1. So, but exercises for strength, right? Squats, deadlifts, presses, rows, pull-ups, loaded, unloaded. There could be unilateral work. After all that, there could be unilateral work in there. But more often than not, this is where we're going to load up bilaterally. NSCA, 2 to 6 sets of 6 or fewer reps at 85% of 1 rep max or greater. Okay, well, easy day. Like squats, sure. All right, 1 RM, we can go test them. Oh, that's right. Most of our clients are, you know, 35 plus with a busy day job, family stress, everything else. We are not 1 RM testing a single person in this gym, with the exception of the maybe 3 or 4 people in the last like year that have competed in some type of a strength sport. So from an application standpoint, yes, at least that one on all these lists, we could get that information. But from a cost of doing business standpoint, we're not going to. So with that being said, what are we going to do? Well, this isn't that helpful then. Well, wait, hang on. Yes, it is. We can look at the intent. Okay, pretty high end of their strength, right? 2 to 6 sets of 6 or fewer reps. All right, we can break those rules, but let's look at the intent of what they're getting at. For us, how many reps will we program for strength work? At what rating of perceived exertion? Well, the answers could be many here, but most of the time, we most commonly use 2 to 10 reps at an RPE of 7 to 9 because intent, right? If we wanted to use 12 reps, could we get someone strong on 12 reps? Yeah. If we wanted to, for some reason, do something with singles, could we do that? Yeah. But for most of our clients, and even this is far and few between, 2 is pretty much the lowest that we get with our people. And do we ever go to an RPE 10? Not in training. Not in training. The only time that a few of our clients see an RPE 10 would be if they decide to go and compete, and it would be on competition day. And one sort of, but even this, I wouldn't say we're taking people to true 10s. Once a year in July, we do an event we call PR for America. And we give our clients an opportunity to come in and go through warm-ups and get ready to come in and we treat it like a mock powerlifting meet, but we do it, we call it like an appropriate powerlifting meet. So instead of it being like barbell back squat, deadlift from the floor and barbell bench press, we let them use whatever variation of squatting, deadlifting, and pressing they currently have in their programming or that they've used in the past that still makes sense for them, and come in and get after it and chase a PR on that day. So that'd be the one other exception, but even there, we're not really looking for 10s and it's like their form went to shit, but hey, at least you got it. I would say on that day, we're still usually helping our clients to find a 9. So goes here. And again, like power, where we said instead of just resting, the rest is built in. With power, it was power. Then we did our core work, and then we went to our mobility drill. And then it's all done at a casual pace. We went back to the top and we did power for however many sets or rounds it called for. Same thing with strength. What we do is we pair non-competing exercises. So lower body and upper body, but lower body push is going to be paired with upper body pull. Lower body pull is going to be paired with upper body push. So like an exact example would be, we decided, new client, let's just go with what it's going to be most commonly. Lower push, goblet squat. Upper pull, inverted row, right? They're going to do 8 goblet squats, 8 inverted rows, and then it says motor control based on priority of FMS or injury history. So maybe for this person, they needed more hip mobility, and we decided to do like a bear crawl hip car. So they did 8 squats, 8 inverted rows, 2 hip cars on each side, and then they went back to the top for 3 rounds. When do they rest? Well, the whole thing's done at a very casual pace. And so some of our clients, depending on, experience level, depending on goals, they might just continuously move through that whole thing again at a very casual pace. Others who are getting stronger, and maybe are a little more serious about chasing the strength, they might do their 8 squats, kind of shake things out, walk around for 30, 45 seconds, maybe a minute. Then they'll go do their row, do their 2 cars on each side, shake things out, and go back to the top. But no matter what, it's still pretty much moving the whole time. There's no one that's going to go through this, okay, rest for 5 minutes, and then we start round 2. So they get through this pretty quick.
Can I ask you a question
Absolutely.
here? So I noticed in all of the programming, there's no defined rest period. And so I have a question about that. And then the other, with respect to tempo for these exercises, how are you coaching that, and are you specific about that?
The first question was defined rest periods. We don't have any rest periods written in to the exact, just what I was just saying, like it's more of a conversation that we have on the floor. And for most of our clients, just moving through this at a constant yet casual pace. So meaning they're not doing their squat, all right, run over the inverted row. It's like keep intent in mind at all times. So we want to make sure that we're fully recovered, and I'm throwing up air quotes because it's not like the definition of like, true recovery, full recovery, like 3 to 5 minutes. But if you think about it, they do their 8 squats, okay? Then they take maybe 30 seconds to like walk over, get set up. All right, they do their 8 inverted rows, and let's say that took them, I don't know, maybe a minute. So now we're at like a minute and a half since they finished their squats. Now they're going to take like another, 30 seconds or so to go over, look at their sheet. All right, I got cars, 30 seconds. So now we're at 2 minutes, and then they do their 2 nice and slow and controlled on each side. Maybe that's going to take another 45 seconds to a minute. We're already over 3 minutes, and that doesn't include the 30 seconds or so they're going to take to go back over, like look at it like, all right, check in with the RPE. Do I want to stay with this weight? Do I think I want to go up? So they probably really are having at least 3 minutes between sets. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah.
So it's just kind of built in there. And then, like I said, if we have like this one dude, Dan, that trains here, power lifter, his programming is going to look a little bit different, but not that different, especially when he's not like coming up on a meet. But he's probably going to stand around and chit chat and maybe run to the bathroom for a minute, real quick between. But it all just comes back to the intent of what he's getting at. But even then, we're not writing in, we want you to rest for this much time. It more so just comes out in conversation. So I'd say the biggest thing that we need with our people, and this, not even that this is super common, but a lot of people, because of other experiences they've had in fitness before coming to us, they think that it needs to be go, go, go. And they think they need to, not their words, ours, experience metabolic stress. So more often than not, we're like pulling back the reins probably to tell someone, hey, slow down. Let's focus on form over fatigue. Like, so to be honest with you, it's just not that much of a conversation either way. And then the other one was tempo.
Tempo in the lift, yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes we do. And normally first program, and I've gone back and forth on this, and this is one that I can probably articulate better. Like if our coaches listen to this, they'd probably be like, oh, I didn't know that you really thought about it like that. But so I'm just telling you this, saying that it's not really recorded anywhere, and I probably should record this. First program, I used to mess around with giving people eccentric focused work. Like, okay, take 3 seconds on the descent of your squat. But anymore, especially with first programs, I'll break this rule sometimes. More often than not, I got away from that because I don't want someone to be focused on counting how many reps they're doing, plus, all right, how much. I just want them to focus on, day one, okay, I learned how to goblet squat. I want to focus on starting tall and tight. I want to reach my hips down and back, and then I want to drive the floor away. That's all I want them to, and I don't even want them to like overcomplicate that, right? I just want them to get some solid training in. Now, competency and independence. They've developed the competency with that movement, and maybe they haven't passed our strength standard. We're kind of getting into like loading types now. I've decided I want to give them a little bit more challenge in the next month, and I don't want to just throw variety at them for variety's sake. How could I appropriately kind of add that next layer to still working on competency with the movement, but give them a challenge that keeps them engaged and is appropriate towards their goal? Okay, let's do eccentric focused work for the next 4 weeks. Maybe we say 2 weeks eccentric focus, and then 2 weeks of like drop into the hole, give me a solid isometric, and then drive back to the top. Would be, I don't even want to say a common approach, but that would be one of the more common approaches that we'll use in terms of prescribing tempo. But we don't go nuts with tempo just because we find it can be a distraction to some people where they're trying to count how many seconds. So we'll talk intent more than literal tempo.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
And when I say that, I mean like intent when it comes to power, velocity all day. Intent when it comes to strength, you're always trying to move the weight as fast as you can. I mean, you're not always, but you shouldn't be able to move it at a super high velocity if we have our intent of strength in mind and RPE 7. And if you are, we really should be having a conversation about RPE, and tempo is a part of that, but it's not the, what's the word I'm looking for? The main topic of that conversation. Does that make sense?
It does. Yep.
Thank you for these questions. They're like helping me to clarify stuff. So
Sure.
I love it. Good there?
Perfect. Yeah.
Cool. So strength. Next, assistance, which is the one that we probably get when I go and present, that I get the most questions on. Like, I don't understand what assistance is. And there's like different people call it different things, but we just call it assistance in our training. And people are like, well, what's it assisting? I'm like, well, it depends on the goal, right? The easiest way to really classify what I'm saying here is that this is the time in our programming where we look to build more volume, if that makes sense, work on smaller muscle groups, even though we don't really think about training muscle groups most of the time, and additional lifts to support the goal. The easiest way to think about it is it's basically all the other resistance training that you would do with your clients. So strength is we're getting our big bilateral movements in. And now this is where we're likely going to get in more of like our multiplanar movement. So, list them off.
Just going to ask
Unilateral lifts, combination lifts. So if you're not familiar with combination lifts, like RDL, bent over row, could be with dumbbells, barbell, but it would be lower down into the RDL. Once we hit the bottom, do the bent over row, and then stand back up. That's 1 rep, right? And there's lots of exercises you can combine, but combination lifts, make it into our assistance training often. Higher volume bilateral lifts. It could be that on workout A, we did that goblet squat, and maybe in assistance on workout B, we decided to do goblet squat again, but now for more volume because they don't have a ton of training experience, and I'd rather them practice that movement on both days at different intensities to build that competency. As we expand their competency, then we can start to give them more movement variability, but I don't want to overload them with having them learn too much in the beginning, right? As an example, I'm not saying that's true of everybody.
Yeah.
And this is also where, our power training and our assistance training is where we're going to fit in a lot of different planes of motion, like example, rotational landmine press, bringing it back to power, like rotational med ball throws and things like that. So a lot of things could go here. The NSCA, bringing it back to my college experience now, doesn't have a classification for assistance, but really I took their hypertrophy and their muscular endurance, and I lumped them together under just one name of assistance. So 3 to 6 sets of 6 to 12 reps at 67 to 85% of 1 rep max. Yeah. 2 to 3 sets of greater than or equal to 12 reps at less than or equal to 67% 1 rep max. The one thing I always point out here, it's very entertaining to me that it's 67% is like a component on both days.
Yeah.
I've never seen 67% written in on a single program I've ever looked at on the internet, which leads me to believe that nobody is doing muscular endurance training correctly, because how could you if you're not following this exactly? So again, like we can look at it for intent. Okay, for their hypertrophy work, they're going lower on the percentage of 1 RM, and they're going a little higher both on their range of sets and on reps. Okay, so it's a little more time under tension at a lower intensity. All right, I get that intent. Muscular endurance. Okay, now it's a little bit lower on the number of sets, 2 to 3, but it's 12 reps, greater than or equal to 12 reps, right? At a very low percentage of 1 RM. So now it's gonna be a lot of time under tension and getting after volume in that way. Okay, makes sense to me. But I don't need to have those percentages and know what people's 1 RM on those lifts are to be able to apply it. No one has 1 RMs on their client for every single exercise that you could possibly prescribe, but we can use the intent that they're getting after. So how many reps would we program for assistance work? A lot, maybe a little, anything in between. What rating of perceived exertion? Most commonly, we use 5 to 20 plus at an RPE of 6 to 8. 8 would be real high. I would say the majority of the time, like 7 is the most common RPE that we use here. Occasionally we'll use 6s. Very, very little do we use 8s. Most time it's going to be 7s because intent. Really, most of our clients here, we're getting after volume. We're getting after a little bit, like I said, different planes of motion. It's not something that we really want to overload most of the time. Just like an aside that I think I've had in every presentation I've ever done on this, this is like a little combination of like, go back to, any more I say this and I get people that look at me, maybe it's like another sign of maybe I am getting old, like my Justin Timberlake joke on people's heads. I said, remember when we all used to read like Flex and Muscle and Fitness and stuff? And people are like, what are those? I'm like, oh God.
What are magazines?
Yeah. Or, okay, bodybuilding.com and no, what's bodybuilding.com? All right, T Nation, no? Okay. But, you go back to, and I guarantee you now, still, you go pick up any of like the current, Men's Health, whatever, you look at these programs and it's like, they're writing a program about hypertrophy. I can pretty much predict it's going to be 6 to 12 reps. Muscular endurance, you pick up some running thing. All right, runners should be doing 12 to 20 reps. Strength, hypertrophy, if we're going to kind of hybrid them, 5 to 10 reps. Hypertrophy, muscular endurance hybrid, 8 to 15. I put those in there because where I talk about this, I most commonly use 5 to 20 plus at RPE 6 to 8. This is 100%. Like, I can't say 100% because that's an absolute, but 99% of the time, I'm using one of these 4 ranges right here when it comes to assistance. I look at the client that's coming in. Okay, what do we got going on? What are they after here? Okay, I think keeping them in the range of 6 to 12. This person, let's go 12 to 20. This person, they're really, they want to get strong, and I know that they could still use some hypertrophy benefits. All right, 5 to 10. Specifically speaking to their assistance work. So this is one of the slides that you might want to screenshot or come back to, just because for us personally, this is where all of our assistance resides, and we've had good results with it. And really just answering those 4 questions, like which one makes the most sense for the person in front of you. And that's how we pick our assistants. As for where it goes here. This is where you'll see there's less. I can't say it's always the case, but again, 99% of the time, made up statistic. All statistics are made up, right? It's just going to be finishing out full body on the day. So let's go back to the example I said before, where it was workout A. We said goblet squat, inverted row, bear crawl, hip cars. All right, so we did lower push, upper pull. Now it's lower pull, upper push to round out the full body approach. And maybe it's not on there, it's 6, so it's not going to be a unilateral thing. So maybe it's going to be this person is just learning, hinging and stuff. So we're not going to have them up and I don't know, I'm overcomplicating even this right now. It could be that we just decide we're going to have them do a standing handcuff hinge right here because the RPE is only 6, right? And so that's not even something that I want them to chase intensity with regards to applying weight, but RPE 6, light enough that they can feel it and they got to work to push it back a little bit. Could be that we were going to have them do, I wouldn't put an RPE on this if it was the case, a glute bridge just to learn what it feels like to find tall and tight with hip extension. We could have gone unilateral and done a single leg RDL here if their competency was there, but case in point being that we're rounding it out. And then same thing with upper push. We did upper pull, was an inverted row. Maybe here we're going to do a push-up, but you can see it says 200 feet. I know what program this is. It's because we omitted pushing and we actually threw in a carry to just kind of double down on postural integrity with this person. But more often we would have something in to round out full body, so upper push there.
Quick question.
The other day would be the same. Yeah.
So you were talking about and maybe this is just specific to kind of the program that's up here, but that you use assistance work as a way to add volume. But I see the overall volume is actually less than you have in the strength.
Yes.
So, with the 2x6, is that just the nature of this program because it's maybe a beginner type of situation, and in the future it might be actually I don't know, maybe it's just becomes 2x12 or it's 4x6. Is that?
We're going to talk about that in detail in a minute, but I'll say, but I'll say that it literally, I think that you're thinking 3 steps ahead, which I love, and I'm going to address that, but it literally is just added volume because the exception would be to not have any assistance training. So they would have just done 3x8.
Right. You're adding volume just by the nature of it being in the program.
Yes.
Got it.
But I love your line of thinking because I think you're asking the right question. Well, hang on, if you're adding volume, and it's low on the RPE scale, but it's also low in sets and it's also low in reps. What the hell is going on here? Well, keep in mind, something that I kind of glossed over, one of the earlier slides said we're going to pick repetitions for the first 4 programs. And so then it extrapolates outward from here. But for the purpose of context, and I know whose program this is the very first program that they ever did with us. So, I'll leave it at that because I'm going to answer it in a second.
That makes sense.
But just remember that this is their very first program. So actually, here we go. So now planning the month in terms of rep schemes, like kind of putting it all together. We've been looking at selecting individual reps, right? And really we talk about like ranges and everything, but once we pick our reps make phases. So a phase would be a month of training, the sheet that we've been looking at the whole time. Phases make blocks. Now we're at the top. The blocks where phase 1 is highlighted, and then we had phase 2, phase 3, phase 4 at the top as well. And then blocks make, you know, years of training someone. So the way that we do it is we take our reps, and this is one of those things where, as I'm about to say what I'm going to say, another one, this is not an absolute. We do break this rule sometimes, very rarely, but this is one of those things where someone could say like, well, why are you doing nonlinear alternating? You could be doing whatever. You're right, we could, but we move a decently high volume of people through our facility. We've experimented with a lot of different approaches, and we found that people do really, really well with this. But don't mistake that as me saying this is what everyone should do. It just happens to be what we've found to work well for our system, and have kind of standardized as being the way that we train our people. So that being said, we organize our reps month to month through non-linear alternating periodization. Here's what that means. We're going to take our typical month-to-month linear approach for your strength work and flip the middle two numbers. So, and really it's not just for strength work. What that looks like, linear, common approach would be, all right, we're going to do 8 reps for a month. Now we're going to increase the intensity and do 6 reps. We're going to increase the load a little bit more. Again, the intensity again, 4 reps. All right, we're going to increase even more. Now 3 reps. So as the reps are coming down, the weight is going up, right? And I'm sure we're changing up the number of sets that person's doing, but that's a traditional linear approach. What we do is we would still start with that 8. We'd start with the higher number. We would flip the middle 2. So now we're going to go 8. We're going to drop down to 4. We're going to skip over 6 and drop down to 4. Then we're going to come back up to 6. And then we're going to finish off with 3. And the main reason why is because it keeps us from going down a path of being more metabolic to more neurological. And this nonlinear approach, we kind of teeter back and forth between the two the whole time, right? So 8 is going to be the most metabolic of this phase, and it's a newer client. Like, this is the most common repetition scheme for strength that we use with new members to the gym. And the reason being is that 8 reps we've just found to be a good number for someone to get enough repetitions to learn the movement, while also being able to find that RPE that we most commonly start with, somewhere in the range of 7 to 8, right? But if I said, hey, you know, first time training, all right, let's go do 3 reps, they just don't have the competency to find that RPE and learn the movement. And it's not good for anybody. It's going to be frustrating for the client. It's going to be frustrating for the coach. So starting here, but now instead of just being like, all right, let's just add more load and go down to 6, what we do is we actually make a big jump. So we did the 8s and for clarity, that 8, 4, 6, 3, each of those numbers is a month. So we're going to do maybe 3 sets of 8, 3 sets of 8. We're going to talk more about that in a minute. Then, you know, the 3rd week and then the 4th week. And then we're going to drop down to 4 reps. So we were more metabolic. Now we're going to go definitely more towards the neurological side of like strength, right? And so maybe it was 3 by 8, maybe now it's going to be 4 by 4, okay? So the total repetitions is less, but the intensity is going to be higher, because 3 by 8 is 24, 4 by 4 is 16, less total reps, but now the RPE maybe on the 8s was a 7. Now maybe it's an 8 for that starting week 1, right? And because the repetitions are less altogether, they're definitely going to have a much heavier weight, or definitely a heavier weight to be able to find that RPE. And because they had a month of building competency with 8, they should have the base level of competency to now express that movement competency to find the strength and appropriately find that RPE 8. Does that make sense for 4 reps?
Yep.
Then, and I won't make the description as long going on, now we're going to come back up to 6. Okay, so now we're going to go a little bit more of a volume approach. We're going to bring it a little bit back more towards, not like all the way over again, you know, not that 8 is all the way over to be metabolic fatigue, but now we're going to kind of go back to like a hybrid of neurologic and metabolic for the month. And then the final month, we're going to take it down to our lowest with 3s. And what it does is it keeps us from being too far away from any one quality at a given time. And in a second, and this is the approach that we use for power and for strength. And in a second, we're going to talk about assistance, how we round it out so that we're truly never staying too far away from any one quality at a given time. So each of those numbers represents a phase of training, typically 4 to 6 weeks, like we talked about earlier. All four create a block, 4 to 6 months. So like the example says here, that was strength. So at the top of the program where it was PSA and there was a number afterwards, it would be P8, P4, P6, P3, or sorry, S, these are strength, S8, S4, S6, S3. Those are my strength repetitions for the first 4 phases for my first block. We map the plan, we place it at the top of the program like so. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's literally that example right there, S8, S4, S6, S3. Obviously we had power and we had assistance as well. And then what would happen, I'm pretty good at PowerPoint, but I'm not good enough to figure out how to highlight in PowerPoint. So I'm gonna show a little bit different here. Their block one, Karen's block one, power, 5342, strength, we just looked at 8463. Assistance, now to answer your question from earlier, 6, notice that we went 5 down to 2, middle flipped. For strength, we went 8 down to 3, middle 2 flipped. But for assistance, we started at 6. We're going to go to 12. Well, now what I've done, and we do this for our assistants, I mean, again, there's no absolutes. I can't say all the time, but I can't think of the last time I broke this rule. We just flip that whole thing. We go lowest number to highest number, middle 2 flipped. And here's why, and it's a real simple explanation. Actually, let's do this real quick and then I'll show it. So here's where I was saying I don't know how to highlight. So instead I made it red. So once Karen finishes this phase 1, we would cross out what's highlighted in yellow and we would take away the highlight and we would highlight the next one, right? So when I sit down to write her next program, and we didn't even get to selecting exercises yet, but most often people, and I say this as I did this for years, we sit down and we overthink how many reps we want to give someone. Well, we just went over all the things that we know from the NSCA, from, I mean, not just the NSCA, American College of Sports Medicine, NASM, like whoever, because they're all kind of teaching the same things. So we have like their prescription with that kind of stuff. We take it out and say, okay, well, what's the intent? And we just talked about all that. Now that we have the intent, we go ahead and we map the plan. Okay, I think it makes sense to do this range of repetitions. For power, we're going to do high to low, flip middle 2, strength the same, assistance low to high, boom. Now, because we've already spent the time logically thinking through the selection of those repetitions for this person, we put it at the top, right? And it makes it super easy to go through and knock out a whole block. That being said, we don't write more than one phase of training at a time. But from a selecting the repetition plan and putting it at the top, we have it there. And then we'd be on to block 2. We'd sit down and we'd do this all over again. We're going to get into that next week in week 4, how we go about making those decisions. But let's talk assistance on that. I think it's on this one. Yeah. So she would go through that. Okay. She finishes a block and then she'd have an end of block meeting. Again, we're going to talk about that end of block meeting next week. Then block 2, there'd be another end of block meeting. Block 3, there'd be another end of block meeting. And this goes on for perpetuity. As long as someone is a client with us, they're going to basically, I mean, not to give away like the structure of what we do, but every 4 programs, like think about most people join a gym. I don't want to say most because I can't speak for everywhere else, but in my experience of meeting with people, they're like, oh, wow, that's awesome. I've never heard of anyone doing that. You join a gym, they get you into whatever type of training you're going to do, even one-on-one personal training, and they just get you going, and it's like training for perpetuity. And they just assume that like showing up and training, like, yeah, that their goals probably never change, apparently, because that's the way that we treat it. Whereas what I'm saying is, let's set our big overarching goal. Let's look at what we want to accomplish in the next 4 to 6 months, depending on how many days a week they're going to train. That's our block, right? And then we're going to reverse engineer. All right, this is what we're going to accomplish in that time. Let's reverse engineer it. We select our repetitions. We'll get into selecting exercises and everything. Once we finish that block, let's not assume that the rest of the big overarching goal is exactly the same or that this client is perfectly happy with the way that everything went. We're going to have many conversations at the end of every single phase. We're going to talk about those soon. But then at the end of every single block, every 4 to 6 months, we're going to sit down with them again, much like when they started the gym, right? Instead of just assuming, oh, they're showing up, everything's good, let's keep going, okay? Now bringing it back to what we were talking about, for us, always highest to lowest, middle two flip for power and strength, but not for assistance. So now, Byron, to bring it back to what you were asking, yes, we start lower volume. I don't know why I'm throwing up air quotes, because we literally start lower volume, and we work our way to the highest volume with our assistance, middle two flipped again. The reason being is we used to do everything highest to lowest, middle two flipped. But let's think about if Karen's block 1, P5, S8. Well, let's reverse the assistance. Now we have A12. Think about a brand new client who just did their power, and we know that that was paired with
Their
core.
work.
Yeah. By the time they get to that, it's just too much. So instead, I'm thinking, right, our 3 overarching goals: consistency, crush goals, and have fun doing it, competency, and independence. I am just going to do something that's going to reinforce, more than likely, what they're going to do for their main strength movement on workout B, right? So the example we gave was like, maybe they're going to do standing handcuff hinge to practice the hinge. And then on workout B, they're going to come in and they're going to kettlebell deadlift. As an example. Now, the scenarios could be endless, but that's the way that we approach it, is have a why like that. Now you could say standing handcuff hinge, they could do 12 and you'd be right. That's not going to be a real fatiguing thing. But let's talk about often doing assistance work. Let's say that new client, you know, they did their power, they did their strength. We get to assistance and we decided, hey, their competency was actually pretty good. And we're going to teach them single leg RDLs with a landmine, 12 on each leg. Nah, like fatigue is gonna affect their ability to do that with any, you know, level of decency form wise, right? So instead we'd say, okay, we could do that with 6s, right? And so we're going to be very methodical. Hey, let's take it nice and slow. 6 quality reps on this leg, 6 quality reps on that leg. We're going to go do, you know, maybe our modified push up with that. And then we're going to come back and just do 1 second set. But again, it's just enough of an exposure that we're aiming for, now I am throwing up air quotes, like perfect form for that total of 12 reps they did on each side, 6, 6, 6, 6. But that's why we flipped it. But now the other thing that it does is by the time that we get to phase 4 of this block, where they're very, from, you know, whatever level it is for them, but it is going to be the most amount of neurological stress for their power, 2s, for their strength, 3s, and their assistance, instead of having them at 6s, where even that like dropped down and now is going to be on the more neurological stress, it's at the highest metabolic. So now we're still making sure that we're rounding out, and just like we're getting that full body approach on that day, we're also making sure that we're not skewing, you know, all the way towards neurological on that on that phase. So and the whole time they're flip-flopping back and forth. So that's true for every single phase on here. When strength goes lower, assistance goes higher. When strength goes higher, assistance goes lower. And I wish I could say that we sat down and was like, oh, this is going to be perfect. And it just came about by trial and error. And honestly, a lot of it was based on, even though we don't use the tier system, on presentations that I've either attended or like what I watched from the NSCA one with Joe Ken. A lot of this is influenced by him and Dan John. So
cool.
Make sense?
Yeah, totally.
Cool. So all of that about selecting reps, the big takeaway is just to write down all the most common rep schemes you use. So if you've been training people and you're watching this, you've been training people for a long time, go back and look. I'd be willing to bet that you probably are starting people out with pretty similar rep schemes, or maybe you haven't really thought about it the way that I just laid out and you just need to go and kind of package up some stuff. But pull out what you most commonly do, and instead of sitting down and just from years of presenting this stuff and talking to coaches and being like, what stresses you out? I hear all the time staring at the screen, wondering what reps I should give someone next time. So knowing that, go back, probably rewatch this section, write down the most common rep schemes you use. I can tell you, you know, for Gen Pop and even for like our athletic population, that nonlinear alternating approach works really, really well. So if that seems to make sense for your system, experiment with that. If not, regardless, write down what you plan on doing with people, map it at the top of the sheet, and follow that. And last word of note on that, do we ever get to say phase 4? I mean, let's go back and look at that. Phase 4, power 2, strength 3, assistance 12. Has there ever been a time where I'm like, oh God, like this person, it does not make sense to give this person 2 reps of power and 3 reps of strength. Like they need more volume. Hell yeah, I've been in that situation. And you know what I do? Sometimes by looking at something and saying no is a good thing, because you're saying no because you're on a thought process versus staring at a screen where you didn't pre-map a plan and going, well, what do I want to do? Because when I look at that and I go, no, that doesn't make sense anymore. I've got the strong why in my head, and it's based on looking at what my plan was. It's going to be very easy still to make that change, as opposed to, again, just sitting down and be like, I don't know where we want to go next. So even if you disagree with yourself when you get there, that's a good thing, because that now looks like a crappy decision because you have a better decision in mind based on what you know. Sounds good to me. So use it. So map that stuff out. All right. So all that, this is all the further we've gotten. Don't freak out, because that's probably like the biggest thing to go through. So questions, I know you've been asking them throughout. So, but any questions off that?
Just super generic ones that came up that might be like very beginner questions, but like, so I know you have the strength tests, you know, in order to progress to the next thing, you know, the goblet to the Zercher, et cetera.
Yep.
Like, let's say, you know, someone is clearly going to go past the goblet and now they're into barbell work. 2 questions there. If they're doing heavier work there, are you having them doing any warm-up sets of that movement? And, you know, like with the barbell? And also, how do you go about selecting their initial weight? Is that done in the assessment the first time, or how do you go about that?
I just jumped over to write down how to warm up with weights. So we actually wrote a blog about that for our clients called how to warm up with weights, because the answer, yes, we want them to warm up with the barbell or with a lighter kettlebell or whatever. They're not just going to jump to their 3 working sets.
Right.
It's a great question there, but it's something that we found that even though we've had conversations about everything, that some of our clients we'd see them like go from their, you know, they just finished doing, in this exact example, overhead medicine ball slam, plank, rib grab. They did their 2 rounds. All right, going to go squat. And we just see them go right over and grab like a heavier weight. Like we know that they used the week prior, and we're like, whoa, what are you doing? And they're like, oh, I'm jumping into set 1. It's like, no, you have to warm up. They're like, I did warm up. I warmed up over on the turf. So and then what they mean is like our warm up going into the program. And so we wrote a blog called How to Warm Up with Weights, and it lays out our whole thing on that. So I'll post that in the group. But the answer is just yes, we do warm up there.
Okay.
Was there a second part to that question?
The second one was like, you know, we've got somebody, let's say, that is, you know, even off initial assessment, they're past goblet, they're into barbell work. Now I have to select a first weight. You're not doing a 1 rep max on them. Are you just in that first workout, you're going to be working with them directly, and you're just going to start with bar and build your way up? Like, you're starting to, you know, how do you start with the weight?
I'll give you an exact example. Someone passes the kettlebell deadlift strength standard, which is a 132-pound kettlebell. In our spectrum, they're going to move on to the barbell RDL, okay? And so I'll say, hey, you know, you just did a 132-pound kettlebell, but when we go over to the barbell, we're going to start out with just the bar, because it's the same movement, but now we've got to learn how to keep that bar in contact with our legs the whole time. It's going to feel a little bit different. So let's do just the bar. And then from there, I'm going to ask you what you think, right? And in mind, like, depending on the person, I'm probably thinking, let's do the first set at 95 pounds, right? Again, the weight is arbitrary, but I have an idea. But by giving them the bar and letting them, obviously we coached them up, demonstrated it, all right, go. We saw it, and now I'm like, okay, let's slap, you know, 25s on, we're gonna do 95, or let's put 10s on. But it's always presented as like how's that sound to you, right? Mm-hmm. And then with time, now they're writing down their weights. They know what they did the week prior, and we don't really have to have those conversations. From there, the conversations might be, hey, why have you been using 95 pounds for the last 3 sessions. Like,
Mm.
I can't imagine that you're not capable of more. Oh, I can do more, which if that happens, then we've broken. I'm just making some weird example there, but
Okay.
yeah, we are a bit more, without saying do this, we're a bit more do this whenever we introduce something new. And then we have them record their weights and we teach them how to basically have that RPE conversation with themselves. On a scale of 1 to 10, let's go like total feel. How did it feel? That was easy, 5. Okay. How many more reps do you think you could have done? And then based on what they say, we're like, oh, okay, so that's about an RPE, insert whatever it is here. Let's go up, right? Or, you know, wherever that conversation takes us. So it's kind of twofold. We're a bit more prescriptive in the beginning. We ask questions that introduce how to use RPE, and then with time and practice of that, they're able to start doing that on their own.
Okay, and then if they've decided that they're gonna bump, do you have like, we only want you to bump X percentage, you know, to get a feel for it, or it's like, if that was super easy, go ahead and add 40?
We don't speak to them in terms of percentages. It's on a very case by case basis. It's rare that we have someone that we're like, whoa, like don't jump that much. More often than not, we're like, hey, let's go up.
Okay.
So I would just say, but the thought process you're on in that conversation, I think it just depends on your audience. So with some of our people, we're just saying to them, I mean, there's times where I'll walk over, I'll watch someone do something and I'll look at their program and be like, RP 7. And I'm like, hey, what do you think next set? We jump up to the 32 kg. And they're like, oh, no, I don't think, like, I'm like, why? You know, like, and it'll just be a conversation kind of like picking on them and we have a back and forth, like, let's give it a try, you know? With other people, it might be pulling the reins and telling them like, oh, you just made a huge jump there. I mean, we have seen clients get frustrated because all that they think is a number and they don't think about, to your point, the percentage jump that is. And they're like, why did that feel so heavy? Or why couldn't I do it? And especially like with people who aren't, you know, real strong on it. Think about like dumbbells. If someone's currently pressing, you know, 20s, and for us, like we don't have 22 and a half, we have 25s. So they're jumping 10 pounds, which doesn't sound like a lot of weight, 10 pounds in total, right? 1 in each hand. So I can do math just so we're clear. It's a 10-pound total jump, right? But it's not just the 10 pounds, it's the percentage of the total weight they were using that is, and that might just be too much. And so where they look at it like, oh, the dumbbell's just a little bigger, I couldn't do it, that's so disappointing. It's like, there's a difference between jumping 5 pounds when you're there and going from 50s to 55s. So, but yeah, great questions, great thought process. You're absolutely on the right path for all of it. So
thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. So sets make sense, I think. How many sets do we do? So this really comes down to how much time we have, right? And what makes sense for their goals. But for us, most of the time, and this is, if we go back to week 1, I showed a picture of our facility, and right when our clients walk in, there's I don't know how big it is, maybe 5 feet, 6 feet tall. There's a huge banner that says, what's your goal today? That's why you're here. And so we go back and we have, to everything that we're talking about, like to your question of like, you know, RPE and like helping them to select weights and everything, a lot of it happens like right off the bat. We don't do it with every single client every single day, but they should be doing this internally every day. And we should be having this conversation with multiple clients every single shift. And basically it doesn't have to be like verbatim. We're not like scripting it out and like, okay, what's your goal today? But walking up to people on a regular basis and making sure that in a total training week, every single person that trains here should be asked some iteration of like, what are we trying to do today? And that conversation will drive a lot of the weight selection, right? So someone's like, oh man, like I deadlifted whatever last week, like I'm really trying to get, and it's my PR week, which we're gonna talk about here in a minute. I'm trying to get after like this today, right? And we have, and Todd's gonna talk about it in the coaching course, we have an approach that we use, we call it GABing, Goals Assessment Barrier. So what they say the goal, oh, I'm trying to deadlift X today. Okay, awesome, like great goal. What's your confidence level with that on a scale of 1 to 10? And they're like, 8, feeling really confident in 8. And you're like, awesome. Why wasn't it a 7? And unless you are my wife, who was the very first person that was asked this question, and her response was, you're right, maybe it should be a 7, which is not what Todd was expecting when he did that. What normally will happen is someone will say, well, because last week I did blah, 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 and it just, I'm feeling real good today. I slept great. I ate really well. Like, I think I'm going to crush this. Awesome. Well, then why isn't it a 9 or a 10? Well, I've never handled this much weight before, and I'm a little concerned that maybe my grip's going to give out. But other than that, like, no, I'm pretty confident. So it's an 8. Well, now this person just told you why they're confident. They told you what they're concerned about, which really is they just told you exactly how to coach them. And they're ready to roll. And what we're about to look at, instead of just thinking about sets, what I want people to think about is setting weekly intentions. The best thing that you can give someone is a goal, or you can help someone to give to you is their goal. And so the way that we approach the number of sets that we're going to do is actually built around setting goals to each week of our training. So going back to our programming sheet, we have a blue column, a pink column, a green column, and a purple column. And what we're going to do is we're going to zoom in here and we're going to look at each one. And so first, just from a global standpoint, let's look at, I'm going to go back out, goblet squat, inverted row, Gandalf shoulder cards, right? So look at that. So it's 3 sets of 8. So we're going to zoom in. Where did that just go? Oh, I'm hitting the wrong button. That would help. So we're going to zoom in. So it's 3 sets of 8, 3 sets of 8, 3 sets of 2 per side, right? But then the next week is still 3 sets of 8, 3 sets of 8, 3 sets of 2 per side. Then it's 2, 2, 2, and then it jumps up to 4, 4, 4. Okay, so we're kind of waving the volume there. And normally, we would also have the RPE change. In this exact program, it doesn't. And I could give you like a reason why it doesn't really matter for the context of this, but just for example's sake, normally where the RPE is 7, 7, week 3, the RPE would probably jump up to 8, and then it would come back down to 7 for week 4. But let's kind of zoom in now on each one individually and look at why. So week 1, we call our base week, because the goal, whether this is their very first program ever, or it's a new program update, they haven't done this exact program yet. So they've just got to set a baseline. There's no writing on the sheet yet. They don't have numbers to work off of from what they did last week. Now, if it is like a phase 2, phase 3 onward, if within the block, their programs in our facility are stapled together, so they can refer back to what weights they used at a different, repetition scheme, but they at least have that to look at. But let's say that this is their very first program ever. They have nothing to go off of. Base week, their goal is just to find the prescribed RPE, period, and write down their weights, right? So now they're not stressing about like, oh man, like this is a lot to learn, and I feel like I didn't even train today. It's okay. Like, number 1, wait till tomorrow. You're probably gonna wake up a little bit sore. It's perfectly normal, and that's not really what we're chasing, but don't worry about that yet. And then number 2, the goal is just to set a base that we can train off of. Speaking of train off of, next week, you're gonna be in what's called train week. Now, and even though I'll go back, this session is going to be done on the 1st and the 3rd. So really, they're going to get a second run at this one in week 1 in base week. That's okay. But just thematically, week 2 is their train week. And I mean, I know super advanced name, probably have no idea why we would call it that. It's because we're going to train off of the numbers that, please God, tell me you wrote down what weights you used last week. And yes, we have our clients write down their weights. We do not write them down for them. So that's why I say that, because sometimes people are like, oh no, I didn't write down my weights. That's on us. We should be making sure they are. So make sure that you're having your clients write down their weights. You could write down their weights if you want, but we're like a busy small group personal training facility where multiple people are going at one time. There's no way that we could task our coaches with recording everyone's weights. So we teach our clients to do it. So they have those numbers to train off of, and now they're going to train off of them in week 2 in train week. Now, that does not mean that they need to use the same exact weight. We're not doing percentage-based training, so it's not prescriptive. We're doing rating of perceived exertion. Well, maybe they slept like crap, they didn't eat well, they're stressed out, insert whatever issue is going on here. Well, a 7 today, the weight that they used last week, might feel like someone put a magnet under the floor and is holding it down. That's okay. But in an ideal world, they're probably new to training or haven't trained for a while. This is their first program, like in the example we've been talking about. They're probably already kind of acclimated, their nervous system already kind of acclimated to this movement and whatever load they were using last week. And even at the same RPE, they're going to be able to use more weight here. But we call it train week because they can look at what they did last week. They can make decisions based on how they're feeling. They can get after it. Well, this gives an entirely different context to the question, what's your goal today, right? Because we're kind of helping them set goals with saying, this week is base week, this week is train week. After train week, we get into what's called PR and go home week. And the goal is exactly what it says. Hit some PRs, go home. So now you'll see if we go back, the sets and the reps during train week were the same as they were in base week. 2 to 3, 3, 2, 3 to 5, right? In PR and go home week, that 2 to 3 and 3 dropped 1 to 2, 2. Reason being, and this is where your question especially becomes important, Byron, is yes, they're going to warm up with weights before they actually get to their working sets here. So it's not that they're going to be in the gym and out in 2 seconds with this. It's just that, again, normally the RPE would jump here. It doesn't on this girl's program for a very specific reason, but normally it would. And they're going to really get after it on this day. Their goal is to set a PR. Now, when someone's brand new to training, it's probably going to be a lifetime PR because they've never really done this stuff before. But even our clients who've been training with us, we are in our 9th year of business as of like a week or 2 ago. Even someone that's been training with us for years, they're still going to try and hit a PR here. It's just more than likely, and I'd be shocked if it was, it's just not going to be a lifetime PR more often than not. What they're going for is a program PR, an appropriately loaded program PR during this week, right? Now they do that. And the one other thing I want you to take note of is assistance is still the same volume. It was 2 all weeks. And their conditioning is going to be a little bit higher. It was 3 to 5 in train week. Now it's going to jump up to 4 to 6. And it's just that, yes, they are going to get through this stuff a little bit quicker. And so we spend just a little bit more time doing conditioning on this day. And really, you could nix that. It depends on the person. But if we've got someone who we know bases if it was a good workout or not on how tired they were, and I just have them do something that's more neurologically fatiguing, like all the strength stuff there, which we know there's great benefit to that, and I don't do something to give them a little bit of a sweat. So for most of our people, because that's most of our clients, that's where we'll bump up their conditioning a little bit on that day. We know that they're going to be a different level of fatigue from that neurological fatigue the next day, but they might not be as sore from that, and they might not be leaving the gym as sweaty. So we'll kind of meet them where they're at and give them a little more conditioning on this day. But the goal, PR, get out of the gym. And then the final week, there's Joe Cam. That's who I've been talking about with the tier system. And this is what is what I'm showing you right now. Wow, words are hard. What I'm showing you right now is very heavily influenced by that talk that he gave at the NSCA, macros, micros, mesos, I think it's called. I'll post the video. And that is that in traditional programs that, especially that I used to see years ago, I don't know as much anymore if people are still doing this, but it's like week 1 and week 2, that's not uncommon for those to be the same, right? Like that's most programs look like that. But in week 3, it's traditionally a deload week. All right, we're gonna do a little bit less in week 3. I'm sorry. Week 3 traditionally is going to be like a higher volume week, like really get after it. And then week 4 is traditionally a deload week. And so you could look at it and say, well, your PR and go home week is a deload week, except for that you just told me that your RPE goes higher. Yes, that is true. That is correct. And then in week 4, where most programs deload, you shoot the volume through the roof. Yes, that is correct. And it's because where Joe said, yeah, we don't do this traditional deload stuff every 4 weeks because I train athletes, not weightlifters, and they don't need to deload like that because we're not training at intensities that really elicit that type of an approach. Same thing with us. Like our clients are not creating enough stress to really need to deload every 4 weeks. And when you're training Gen Pop clients, there's deloads built in. They're called vacation. They're called work's crazy. I can't make it to the gym right now. the last thing I need to do is back off someone's intensity and say, oh, you know, we just want you to come into the gym and do this week. Because those times are going to happen naturally. And if we really need it, we'll be aware of that from the conversations that we're having with our clients, and we can call an audible sometime. So what we do in Reach Week is we typically, depending on how many sets they were doing, but like in this exact example, we're basically doubling the volume from their PR and go home week. But maybe given, you know, she's going to go to 4s after this phase. We know her strength is going to go 8-4. Maybe in her next phase, it's 4x4, 4x4, 3x4, 5x4. So we're not necessarily doubling it there. It's not going to 6x4, but it is jumping back up to 1 higher than weeks 1 and week 2. Make sense? So the goal here, you could look at that and think, holy cow, 3 to 4 sets, 4 sets, 3 sets. Notice that the conditioning did drop off though to its lowest point. This is going to take forever to get through. Well, no, once again, what's your goal today? Well, we help our clients to be aware it's Reach Week. And I have a blog that I'll post for this as well as to how we actually communicate this to our clients. We give them the goal of getting in the gym and out in the same amount of time as they did the weeks prior. So now this is going to change weight selection for an RP7 potentially. And a few things could happen. They could say, hey, you know what? My goal is to take the weight I did in week 2, now do it for 4 rounds, and that would be during train week. Their top weight they did during train week, and get through 4 rounds and still get in the gym and out in an hour. Or maybe they're new to training and they found out during PR and go home week that they're so much stronger than they realized just because they've never done this before. And they're like, hey, I'll bet you, I really think I'll be able to get through 4 rounds with my PR weight and still get out of the gym in an hour. And no matter what, like, it's probably going to be safe. Like, we can never guarantee it's going to be safe, but we can look at that. We can have conversations with them. We can watch and we can make sure that the weight selection's safe, but we can start to make them a part of the process of setting intra-session goals that way that keeps them way more engaged with the training process than just, okay, I got this many sets and this many reps today. Make sense?
Yep.
Questions on that?
No, that makes a lot of sense.
Cool. And the conditioning is less on that day for time purposes. I mean, I kind of glossed over that, but we're there now.
Well,
this
and
day,
their heart
hungry.
rate it's up probably pretty good finishing that.
And this is a good bit of metabolic stress leading up to that anyways. So
yeah,
that's a pretty packed program. So bringing it home. Boom. Somehow these always work out to go like right up to what I think they're going to. I always like estimate, I'd probably do this in 2 hours. So it looks like we'll be right there. So what about conditioning? This, and it probably will be at some point, could be its whole own presentation in itself. And for anyone that's seen any of a programming presentation I've given before, I have expanded on this a little bit this round. The big thing is that it still comes back to intent. What is our intent? Remember who we train. And I say that for the purposes of this one. We're talking about training Gen Pop. So specifically in our gym, people age 35 plus that want to look, move, and feel amazing without getting banged up in the process. Even when they've tried, in their mind, seems like everything else before. Keep the goal or goals in mind always. And I really should just change that to keep their goal or goals in mind always. So we got to have that. We're going to talk about that in a minute. What's term? So a little resting heart rate, like every night. Uh-oh, am I frozen?
I came back.
Okay. I'm getting my resting heart rate like every night. With this, it could be that you're teaching them how to get it and they're getting it at home. It's not going to be very accurate if you have them come in, hey, go lay down for 5 minutes and let's get a resting heart rate. So I'm talking a true resting heart rate. So if your clients have like a Fitbit or anything like that, you probably can easily get that information. Otherwise, it might be that you need to teach your clients how to get their heart rate and have them do it at home whenever they're relaxed and get it that way. Build and maintain an aerobic base. And this, all the credit on this goes to Mike Robertson, the photo that we see here to the right. And I'm going to talk in a minute about like specific goals, but this is something that especially with Gen Pop folks that we really want to be aware of. And have to, no, but if we really like our overarching mission for the companies that we own is human development for development's sake. So their goal is fat loss, right? Well, you know, we can follow like the Alan Cosgrove hierarchy of fat loss. All right, they've got to be getting in, you know, if they've got 3 hours a week, all right, 3 hours of strength training. Yeah, there's gonna be some finishers on those days. They've got 4 hours. Okay, let's add in some high intensity interval training. They've got more. All right, we're gonna get in, you know, they've got more than 5. We're gonna get in some steady state work, right? But that makes the steady state work go way back to like only if they have time. Well, if someone has a high resting heart rate, like the example that Mike Robertson has here in this image that I stole from him, resting heart rate equals 80. My opinion, we're doing a complete disservice if we're like, well, based on the hierarchy of fat loss, we're going to throw this person into HIIT. And, you know, more than likely, like the resting heart rate is going to come down too. But more than likely, they might make some short-term benefit, but we're going to destroy this person, right? So instead, when we understand that their resting heart rate is so high and we say, sure, I understand their goal is fat loss, right? Well, let's make sure that we're getting them in here consistently for their strength training. Let's make sure that we really educate them that, you know, the weight loss goal they have, we've got to be talking about nutrition, right? We've got to help them to understand that the biggest contributor to daily caloric burn is actually their resting metabolic rate, right? And the only way to increase that to be on our side 24/7 is actually really through the resistance training that's going to build a little bit of lean muscle. No, you're not going to get bulky, and is going to contribute to them actually having their metabolism on their side. Again, we're working on that diet, so we're just having better quality and quantity of food. The conditioning isn't really that big of a factor. So one, it might be helping to educate people about that. Further, like if you're not familiar with how important sleep and stress is whenever it comes to weight management, it's huge. If anyone's interested in really going deep on that, there's a book that came out in the last, I don't know, maybe 2 years called Why We Sleep. And there's also, if you don't want to read the book or listen to it on Audible, at the very least, go listen to, I think his name's Matthew Walker, on the Joe Rogan podcast, the interview that they did. It's outstanding. And I'm talking about sleep and we're talking about conditioning. Like, what am I doing here? Well, when we can help people to be in better shape aerobically, it's also going to have a lot of carryover to reduce stress, improve sleep, and all of those things are going to contribute to their weight loss endeavors way more than putting them into a super high intensity conditioning class that's going to increase their EPOC, right? Like that everyone's going to go and tell them, well, you got to get in something, you're going to be burning calories for hours. Like, no. Let's take everything we just talked about. Get your metabolism on your side with some strength training. Let's work on your diet. And let's add in some low intensity aerobic work to start to bring down that resting heart rate, improve your sleep, your stress levels, and that's where it's really going to come from. And that's your conditioning right now. Sure, we could make some short-term dramatic results with other stuff, but it's not going to work out in the long term. Human development for development's sake, not workouts for goals 4 to 6 weeks from now. That's our take on that. Expand the aerobic window. So to everything that I just talked about, Mike's got this picture here that I stole from him. I'll also post, I said warm up. I'm just making a note that I'm also going to post the article that this picture is taken from Mike Robertson. But in short, again, credit goes to him on this, and it's absolutely awesome, the content that he's put together, and I'll post a link to it. This aerobic window idea is that if someone's resting heart rate is 80, as he has here in the picture, and their aerobic threshold is 160, which a simple way to determine that is through a modified Cooper's test. I'll also, sorry, I keep jumping up, but I'm going to make sure I get you guys this stuff. Determine that through a modified Cooper's test, right? And really what that is, like from a feel it standpoint, if you're like, what the heck is aerobic threshold? Imagine that you were walking up a flight of stairs and there's a pace where it's not work at all. But I think everyone has said something along the lines of like, I had no idea I was so out of shape after you go up a flight of stairs and you're winded, right? Well, there's a tempo that you could have done where you might, be like, oh, I'm working, but your breathing rate is pretty steady. You're not like feeling like, oh God, I got to slow down or else I can't maintain this. But if you went any faster, your respiratory rate would go up, your heart rate would go up, and you would have to slow down. And that's kind of what it feels like to be at your aerobic threshold, right? And what Mike has here is that the difference between the two, your aerobic threshold minus your resting heart rate, is your aerobic window. So in this example here, athlete A, 80 to 160, there's 80 beats in that aerobic window. But athlete B on the right, resting heart rate 50, aerobic threshold 175, there's 125 beats in the middle. Now, think about, he talks about it a lot from like a performance standpoint, but even think about this from a quality of life standpoint. Your client, like, I don't know about you guys, but I get a lot of people who come in, sure, like the weight loss and like the vanity type stuff, but also just being able to say like, I want to enjoy life more. I want to be able to go out and play with my kids or my grandkids, or, this one guy that we have come in here, he's like, I don't want to hold my friends up whenever we go vacation in Europe. Like, he just wants to be able to walk and keep up with his friends. So if his aerobic window is 125, that means he has a range of 125 beats where he's going to be mostly aerobic energy production. Whereas if he looks like on the right there, which I would be surprised if his aerobic threshold was 160, I'd be willing to bet it's lower than that, where maybe he's only playing with 50, 60 beats to stay aerobic. And we know that if he goes above that, he's not going to be able to maintain. He's not going to be able to keep up with his friends. He's got a very limited window to be able to do that in. Not to mention all of the negative effects we talked about with sleep and stress and everything else from being so out of shape. So understanding the difference and looking at it and saying, okay, our goal with all of our people in line with their goal is to expand that aerobic window for all the benefits that will give us. Again, I'll post a blog that will expand on that a little bit more. And right in line with everything I said, don't smoke people or rarely do it. I'm not saying that we can never do some workouts that are going to test our mettle, because sometimes we do, but it's going to be with a purpose, right? So on our program, our conditioning stuff is going to go down at the bottom, typically in finishers, but in a minute, we're going to talk about other places that we apply it. But to bring it back to what I said, and this is something I've never put in before, what are the most common goals that we hear when it comes to conditioning? So again, I can't speak for everybody on the call or coming back and watching the replay, but fat loss, and again, people use different terms here, fat loss, weight loss, tone up, lose my belly, whatever word they're saying. Basically, they're saying it's a body composition goal, right? Health, and I would include quality of life kind of under that like health banner. And then for us, really is in third place, performance. We don't get as many performance goals. So again, depending on who you work with, what context you're in, but more often than not, the goals, and I'm not talking conditioning goals, I'm talking the goals that our people are coming into the facility with: fat loss, health, and performance, right? So having those in mind, having those in mind, how much differently would we program for each? Well, keeping all of this in mind, it depends. If we're working with the athlete A on the left there, it's all going to be, really trying to help improve that person's aerobic window, right? And we're going to look at what that looks like. But let's say that they actually look more like athlete B on the right, and the goal is fat loss. Okay, well now that's where we talked about earlier, that hierarchy of fat loss approach comes in. And now we're looking at, all right, let's still make sure that strength training is the base, because they're still going to benefit from the improving their RMR, right? And then they have a little bit more time. All right, let's get in some more metabolic, like high intensity, intervals, whatever. So like here we do our metabolic conditioning classes. I'll show you some examples of that here in a second. And making sure that they're still getting in lots of low intensity activity throughout the week so that they're maintaining and hopefully even expanding that aerobic base, that floor, right? And just one word of note on like if you're looking at like the athlete A one where the aerobic window is only 80 and you're like, well, if we bump up the top, we're still expanding the aerobic window. No, we want to lower the floor more than we actually want to raise the ceiling of people. As we lower the floor and their work capacity improves, the ceiling will start to go up as well, but it's not until we get to a low resting heart rate that we really want to worry about crushing those people. We don't want to crush them ever, but start to give those people higher intensity things, right? But for fat loss, if it was for health, I mean, we don't really need to crush them. Again, I keep using that word. I'm not trying to crush anybody, but we don't need to get them into higher intensity stuff maybe as often as that fat loss person. So it's just really keeping them moving often, keeping them moving well, and feeling good, and still working to be more like that athlete be on the right with the larger aerobic window. Performance, now that's where we're starting to go and become way more prescriptive, and that could be where I said maybe someday this would be a presentation on its own. Could absolutely be a presentation on its own. But that's what I mean when I say that we want to keep their goals in mind. Look at their goals, and it still comes back to, well, then what's my intent? And also having in mind like the health of that person and putting them in the best positions to be successful. So for us, again, the main areas where, like from a prescription standpoint, where we add conditioning into the programming, conditioning with finishers, right? And the why to what we're going to give people, many. And I could give some examples, but basically it's going to be on both days of the program at the end. And so you can see, like looking at this example here, Karen's program, 3 to 5 sets. She has battling ropes, 10 seconds on, 20 seconds off. So we're doing a couple things. It could be that we're just cranking our heart rate up at the end, taking advantage of a little bit more EPOC after doing all the work for resistance training that's going to get her metabolism working for her 24/7 to contribute to her goal of, what was it, improve body shape, lose the belly, her words, right? So yes, it checks the box for that. It also could be that she likes to get a little bit of a sweat, and we know that she's chasing metabolic stress. So that could have been my why for putting this in here. Yep, checks the box on that. But it's also not such a high volume that it absolutely crushes her and it detracts from her ability to come back and train with us again in the next 48 hours or so, right? That top overarching goal, consistency. So on this day, we took that approach. On day 2, we took an easier approach. It says assault bike, easy pace. And we actually just increased the distance on her, and we're still giving her that goal of, hey, you're trying to get in the gym and out in about an hour each day. So we went 1 mile in week 1. Week 2, we made it 1.5 miles. Week 3, we made it 2 miles. And then we dropped it back down during that high volume reach week in week 4 with 1 mile to 1.5 miles. So just different ways that you could prescribe that. But there's lots of approaches that we could use in the final 3 to 15 minutes of all of our sessions. And it just depends on what we want or need to do. It could be that you say, to go back to something I said earlier, well, this person's a runner, or this person is, I'm pointing like you guys can see, we're next to a mixed martial arts gym. This person's going over for Muay Thai class after this. Well, then depending on how much time between, what they're doing and how much of whatever it is that they're doing, how much they're doing it, maybe we don't have any conditioning for them in the facility. Or maybe it's just their conditioning is more, loaded like postural integrity work, like carries and things like that. And it's not necessarily getting their heart rate up real high. It all comes back to what's your intent, have a why. That being said, lots of things that we could do. And these are all laid out in full detail in the ebook. You Can't Get Bored. And if you don't have it, just shoot me a message and I'll make sure that I get it to you. But fixed, that would mean fixed time work, fixed time rest. So the example we had, 10 seconds on, 20 seconds off for rounds. Variable, fixed, fixed, variable, variable, variable. We don't do really any of this anymore. But that's not saying that I wouldn't. I still would. We've just had issues with heart rate that we just don't do a lot of it in our facility. But variable fixed would be work to a set heart rate, work for a fixed amount of time. Fixed variable, work for a set amount of time. And then rest to a certain heart rate. Variable would be work to a certain heart rate, rest to a certain heart rate, and for all of those, repeat for rounds. Density work, popular one is EMOMs, every minute on the minute, but the minute is just one, variable of time. It could be whatever time frame you want, but every minute on the minute, do 10 kettlebell swings for 10 minutes. Time circuits could be something like, all right, for the next 10 minutes, you're gonna circuit through these 3 exercises. The goal is to keep moving the whole time and be able to breathe through your nose the whole time, as one example. Distance would be like the assault bike that we just looked at. 1 mile, 1.5 in week 2, 2 miles. And then the main thing that you want to have in mind with this is how would or could you progress these? So instead of just slapping them on someone's program, be like, all right, we're going to do this month. All right, next month, we're going to do this. We can start to look at it just like we do with our strength training. All right, well, fixed. If we were doing 10 on, 20 off, that's 30 seconds around. We could go to 15-15, or maybe we decide that we want to change it from like a 30-second total time for the interval. Maybe we go to a minute and now she's working for 20 seconds, but she's going to rest for 40. But it just comes back to just like selecting the repetitions, have an idea in mind of how you're going to progress this across the block for the person so you're not overcomplicating it when you sit down. So questions on that?
No. Yeah, if you wouldn't mind shooting that book over that you were mentioning. I don't know if you want email or something like that. Yeah, that'd be good.
Just put a note on I'll just post the link to it in the group as well.
Okay, thanks.
And then if they're deconditioned, and this would be like most of our clients in the facility, I feel like what I'm about to show you is probably the most common thing that we program, would be, like I just said, this is an example. The circuit that you see here at the very end, I think it'll zoom in, yeah. 10 minutes, 3 exercises: light marching sled push, cross crawl, farmer carry, 100 feet on the sled push, 20 yards on the cross crawl, 100 feet on the farmer carry. Just circuit through that as many times as you can in 10 minutes, with the caveat being that you're able to breathe through your nose the entire time. So that's how we're controlling the intensity. And something like that is going to keep someone more aerobic, more in that cardiac output intensity range. Now, it's not long enough to truly be a cardiac output session, but still, we're kind of checking that box of keeping them more aerobic. They've absolutely, their heart rate has been at least at an aerobic level from the work that they did that preceded this. So now by adding on this additional 10 minutes at the end, it's probably stretching them out to about an hour of more than likely having their heart rate up in that aerobic range and getting that additional benefit from it. But that's a common approach that we used the other day, where this one was light marching sled push, cross crawl, farmer carry. Workout B, we went reverse sled drag, cross crawl, slosh pipe, Zercher carry. And I'm not saying you have to be this detailed with stuff, but to round out full body, I'm going to go back out to the full program. So this was a hinge day, right? And then light marching sled push. Actually, I would say normally I would flip it from this, because normally I would probably do the reverse sled drag on the hinge day, because the hinge day is going to be more hip dominant, right? It's a hinge. And then the reverse sled drag is more terminal knee extension. And then on the squat day, do a marching sled push, because the marching sled push is going to be, knee extension as well, but more hip extension. So kind of round out that full body. Obviously, I didn't there. It's not that big of a deal, but just giving you a little more thought process of how you could look at programs and think like, have we checked the box and gotten full body into this session here?
So 2 quick questions on that. And I'm sure it's going to be like the answer is it's individual, but how do you determine, I mean, deconditioning, that's a spectrum, right? Like how are you determining who is deconditioned enough to take away the assistance work? And then also, is there a like a set point or whatever when you would, okay, now I can add assistance work for this person?
Yeah. For us, this has been a topic of debate. Not like we're literally sitting around debating it, but we're like, man, should we keep doing this? And right now we're like, we do, but it's not a true resting heart rate. That's one of the things, we're kind of deep into like planning 2020 right now. And we had a really good talk at in-service on Friday with our staff about things that we could be doing better. And while what I'm about to say didn't come up, it would fall under the banner of what we said, which is kind of being like a one-stop shop for a whole lot of things, and stop thinking of it as just like, just training, like it begins and ends at that hour. That's one thing that really bothers me, because I realize we could have such a bigger impact. And so now I'll say what it is that we've been kind of debating is, in our personal orientation, we have people lay back in a recliner for 5 minutes with the pulse box on, and we get a heart rate. I didn't say resting heart rate. I normally say resting heart rate, but it's not a true resting heart rate. And we've seen crazy numbers on that. But from that, if someone is greater than 65, I'm saying, and it could be white coat syndrome. It could be, that they're just, which I mean, there's another version of white coat. They're just stressed out to be in the gym. The environment that they're in, even though the chair is comfy, the music's loud, people are dropping weights. But I've always said in that context, greater than 65, we've got to work on this. That being said, I wish I had a better answer. I wish I had, and it's one thing that I want to work on for next year. I don't know what that will be, but a way to really get a better grasp on like actual health when it comes to like aerobic health for our clients. So it could be, you know, testing people, giving them, maybe it's us providing them that pulse ox and saying, hey, you know, take your resting heart rate like a number of times throughout, first thing in the morning, let's do it like at night before you go to bed, whatever, and start to get a little more of an average over a few days. That in combination, if we want to take it a step further and also do like a modified Cooper's test, there's a lot of ways we could do it. But for us, the short answer to what you just asked, greater than 65 beats a minute in that setting, absolutely.
Okay.
And you'd think that wouldn't be many people, but we've seen so many people come in the 70s and 80s and even higher, where at least in that setting, their heart rate's like through the roof. So.
Oh no, I work in home health physical therapy, or have for a while, and so we're taking that all the time, and it's very regularly above that. So.
But you believe that they're lower than that in a different setting, or do you think like people are that deconditioned?
A lot of people are that deconditioned.
It's crazy. Yeah. So regardless of why, someone's sitting there in a relaxed, you know, state, well, semi-relaxed state, and it's that high, it's like, yeah. So, and then kind of continuing on and wrapping up the whole conditioning thing is I talked about neurometabolic continuum. And so the neurometabolic continuum, bringing it back to like your question about, you know, Joe Ken and like, is there a time to do power-based stuff late in the session? Traditionally, like with what we're doing, and the reason why we don't do that with our clients, it's more of like a cost of doing business. With athletes, absolutely. But with our clients, like having them do power-based stuff in a fatigue state, sometimes we do. Self-limiting type stuff like med ball throws and slams, but definitely not Olympic lifts or like any like higher risk type movements. But for the most part, on a daily perspective, we follow the neural metabolic continuum, right? So we talked about like strength, right? Like our pure strength and our power stuff's gonna be neurological. We get to our assistance, it's metabolic, and conditioning is gonna be more metabolic. So that's on the day, but also across the week. We want to start the week more neurologically demanding and work our way to more metabolically demanding. That being said, it's rare that we have someone who's consistent enough that we can really make sure that every time they come in, they're like thematically moving across the spectrum. But I'll talk about how we sort of do with our conditioning classes. So in an example, and anyone that's in strength faction, like this is how the strength faction programs are set up. Monday, higher intensity strength and power. If we're going to do some type of a conditioning finisher, it's going to be more speed, power, energy system development. Wednesday, now we're going to, you know, maybe go medium high intensity strength and power. It could still be the same number of sets and reps, but maybe the RPE is different, or maybe, you know, you look at like, not for everybody, but the deadlift and the squat. For most people, if they have a high level of competency with both, deadlifting is more neurologically demanding than squatting. So they're deadlifting hard and heavy on Monday, and then they're squatting on Wednesday, which is going to be a little bit more metabolic with their loading and everything. Maybe it's that approach, but medium high intensity strength and power on Wednesday, and they're conditioning more middle of the road. And what I mean by middle of the road is the speed power. Maybe it's something very explosive for like 8 seconds of work, 52 seconds of rest for X number of rounds. And then on Wednesday, maybe it's like 20 seconds on, 40 seconds off, 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off, something like that. And then on Friday, if we were going to do like an ABC approach, maybe now their C workout is going to be more time under tension and volume. So maybe it's that they're only going to do power, strength, and conditioning on workouts A and B on Monday and Wednesday, and workout C on Friday, they're going to do all of their assistance work. So now maybe that's like single arm, single leg, more volume, more time under tension, a little bit of like a bro workout. And even, you know, it's not to say that it's like bros only. We have lots of girls that we set up on an approach like that, right? But now if we want to take it a step further and say, all right, well, someone's going to train more than 3 days a week. Okay, well, maybe on Tuesday, they could stimulate what they did on Monday. That would be something like the current strength faction program, like a neural charge. So still very explosive, right? But it's full recovery between exercises, and we're just stimulating our nervous system from what we did on Monday and getting prepared to come back and crush it on Wednesday. Or maybe it's going to be conditioning, but it will be a bit like shorter work, longer rest, explosive, like we do in our metabolic conditioning that I'll show here in a minute. And then on Thursday, all right, getting later in the week, we just trained hard 3 days in a row. Maybe it's just a good recovery day. So Someone wants to go to yoga on this day, or maybe they're going to do more of that like original strength, like Fury Thursday type approach, but something more recovery based on Thursday. And then over the weekend, cardiac output, go get like that aerobic development work in. Now, again, it's rare, like pretty much none of our clients. I literally think that we have right now one client that is actually on a program that's set up like this that I know adheres to it. And that's just because he's getting ready for a military selection. And so it makes sense for what he's doing. But most of our clients, it's like just getting in the gym and getting a win is the win. And we can't really control for all these factors. So in that case, and then if someone wants to put themselves in the trash can, which we really don't want them to do it on Friday. Reason being is because it's after the times where if they come in really fatigued from doing that, that would not be good to come into Monday or Wednesday really fatigued, right? Higher incidence that they'd be injured. Same thing with Friday, but doing it Friday, like after they're more time under tension or just omitting that session and getting after it with whatever it is they want to do, they then get their quality aerobic and recovery work in over the weekend, and they're safe to come back, hopefully, and get after it again on Monday. But again, if someone's going to do that, it should be far and few between, not a weekly thing. So what about off days, or, and really, I kind of want to, I wish I changed the title of this slide to like, what about those clients who aren't consistent enough to control for a 5-6 day a week program because they would just be all over the place? And so what we do is we have what we call our metabolic conditioning classes. And it's essentially been the answer to like, well, what should I do on my off days? And we used to take the time to say, oh, well, go do, you know, something like this. And they would come back and be like, how did it go? They're like, I didn't do it. And just the same reason why we're a big factor in people being consistent is coming in here helps them to check that box. We decided to add on metabolic conditioning as a perk to our members. And we built it around the neurometabolic continuum. So maybe someone's going to lift on like Monday and Friday, even if that's like real spread apart, but they were going to come in and do metabolic conditioning on Tuesday and Thursday and Saturday. And so they're still getting in 5 days a week of working out. And we know that their workouts are not really going to take into account, like A is not going to be more neurologically demanding than B. They're going to kind of be that like well-rounded full body program like we've been showing. But we can still control for if they're going to come in on Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, working our way across the neurometabolic continuum with a class like this. So if I zoom back out, there's Tuesday in the yellow, Thursday in the green, and Saturday in the red. And rather than like talk through everything on here, the main thing I want you to see is that we use a one down, one up approach on most of this stuff, if not more. So for instance, it says dead stop kettlebell swing, right? But if someone's not ready to do swings, but they have some competency with like beginning to learn it, maybe they're just doing kettlebell hikes. Or for the person who's not ready to do any, you know, really get ready to do like the actual like swing component at all, maybe they're just doing Dan John's like belly swings, or he calls them Bulgarian goat bag swings. But it's really just having like, I think most people will be able to do this, but if they can't, they'll go down to this, well, they'll go down to this easier exercise, or they're ready for more, they can go up to this harder one. And that's going to be a big theme in next week's presentation. And we really rounded out to where even then neural, like metabolic across the day. Why isn't this thing responding? There we go. The first circuit is more power-based. The second circuit is a little bit longer, more time under tension. So let's look at each of these three quick videos here. Oh. You guys probably can't hear that, can you? I want to see real quick if I can. Not that it's a big deal, but. So you have walking inverted rows going on the left. Here's going to be swing variations in the middle. Oh. So we got med ball throws going on there, and then mountain climbers or mountain climbers with sliders going on over here. And again, all of these stations are not like, do this here. There's choices at each one. So now this is the B circuit of that same day. So you can see we have kettlebell deadlifts or like elevated from bench press boards. Over here, we've got squat variations. Behind her, you're gonna see, we're doing like a modified burpee, and behind them, you're gonna see some battling rope stuff.
So the A and B is each client doing both of those, or it's a selection?
No, they're doing both. So we all go through the A circuit, and then we huddle up, and then we all go through the B circuit.
Okay. When the video's over, would you mind just throwing up the B again?
What's that? Say that again?
Would you mind just throwing up the picture of the B again, zoomed in?
Yeah. Cool. And then the workout C, this is not an exciting, or wait, that was, now here's workout B. So whereas that day was more like actually using weights and it was very explosive, or like, you know, strength based, this day there's no weights. It's all body weight. It's going to be a bit more aerobic and like play. So how those people are oddly getting up and down from the ground. What they're doing is like a play on like the Brazilian get-up test. So they're being told each round, okay, you can't use your arms. So that's what's going on there. That's why they're awkwardly holding their arms like that. Or you can only use your right arm and your right leg. Your left arm and your left leg can't touch the ground. And it's actually a mortality test. But with our clients, it's just a fun way to, and there's a conditioning effect to it, to give them a challenge, to get them thinking, and their heart rate is absolutely up, but it's not crushing them, right? So it's appropriate for that Thursday selection.
A little bit of fun variability in their movement too, right?
And then what did you just say something? I have music on my
I said
end.
I said it's like some fun variability, right?
Yes.
Like we're something totally not in a specific plane. They're getting all kinds of stuff, and they're getting to you know, create some more neural connections around movement.
Exactly. And it makes sense at this time. It wouldn't really make sense like in the middle of our strength training, right? Which is what, you know, I've made that mistake earlier on in my career with this stuff, and still see some people do that. Like when we go present for Equinox and watch like application of things. And so it's not to demonize anything. It's just always thinking back to intent and like, what are we doing right now? And what are we trying to get after? And right in that same theme is like now on this same day, the B workout on this day, these are called blaze pods. And so there's lights on the floor and people are in teams. I don't know what it was this day. I think there's 2 teams maybe. No, there's 3 teams, red, blue, and green, as you can see them lit up. And basically each person is on a team and they're trying to tag the lights whenever they come up, and they're competing to see who can tag the most in a given amount of time.
That's great, man. That's super cool.
So that was a Kickstarter that we supported. They're for sale now. They're awesome. We use them all the time.
Yeah.
Our clients absolutely love it. And you can do all kinds of stuff with them. You can put suction cups on them, and you can stick them to the windows. You can set them on the, you know, they're really cool. And then this is the workout, the Saturday workout. So Saturdays are lower key, more, you know, time under tension, more aerobic, more recovery based, still fun. So prior to this, and I'll go back to the programming sheet so you can see it, there was a movement circuit that was built around, like, I think increasing their volume. I'll pull it up and we can go back and look at it. And then it was an isometric circuit. And so here's just like one quick glimpse of the isometric circuit here. Exciting video, no one's moving.
Was that mannequin challenge?
Yes. So there's what that looked like. You want to see the B workout?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm gonna just, if you wouldn't mind zooming in on that for me.
Yep. So there's A.
Yep.
For each one. And then
cool.
There's the second half of that. And I'll tell you what, I'll just post this one to the group.
Okay.
Figure out which month that is, but. So that's from the standpoint of helping our clients understand things they can do on their off day. That's been our answer to that. So if someone's working in like a big box, like commercial facility, and they're offering classes, like when we go present for Equinox, what I tell those guys to do is look at the current class offerings. You got yoga, Pilates, some type of a HIIT class. You've got like, I don't know, there's like Guns and Buns. I don't know, I'm just making up names here, but instead of looking at the class and be like, okay, this one's called that, this one's called this, like start to look at them thematically and be like, what type of stress, or like, what's the intent of this class? Okay, as I'm making recommendations for my clients on what to do on their off days, you can start to direct them towards classes that make sense, keeping that neurometabolic conditioning or neurometabolic spectrum in mind. So, and then the last thing, and this is the very end, the most underutilized conditioning approach of all, we've talked about it a bunch, but it's just generally making sure that our clients understand the benefit of lots of low intensity movement all throughout the week. I've worked with so many people over the years who are consistent at getting to the gym 2 days a week for their strength training, and then maybe get in like another 1 to 2, maybe even 3 metabolic days, which our metabolic classes are 45 minutes. So still, maybe they're getting in 3.5 hours of training a week, and they're like, I don't understand why I'm not like ripped yet. And I'm like, what's the rest of your week? But let's not even talk about diet, because we should, but just from a movement perspective, what's the rest of your week look like? And they're like, they work a 9 to 5 that really is a 6 to 5, and then they go home and they're just so tired, and maybe somehow they got into the gym. I don't even know how they got into the gym with that a couple times throughout the week, but the rest of the time is sitting at their desk, sitting watching Netflix, sitting down and eating, and they just didn't even realize, like, oh crap, if I could just fit in another 30 to 60 minutes and take a brisk walk on my lunch break or park a little further away, like every opportunity to get low intensity movement in will contribute towards the goal. Not in a big way from like a caloric standpoint, but more so from that aerobic health standpoint, and the cascading benefits from that. So, and of course there's a caloric benefit as well. So we went a little bit over today after I said I think we're going to be done on time. So
yeah, I asked a lot of questions, so slowed you down a little bit.
I love it. That helps. Any other questions on anything? It's okay if not.
Well, I guess I maybe kind of just a general one. It's not really well formed, but like I know you're working most with Gen Pop. Do you ever have like in season and out of season considerations for I don't know, you probably, I don't know where you are, but like maybe you have like hunters or skiers or something like that. Are you ever modifying their program based on the fact that they're deep in their activity in that season?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Like we don't have a ton of athletes, but like for instance, right now we have a high level high school wrestler, and high level in that this little group of kids that they left here for a while, but like one of them, and I'm taking zero credit for what I'm about to say because I trained him when he was 11 to like 12 maybe. But he is wrestling his first year at Michigan this year, right? And so I say that because these kids are in this club that is like really high level, and most of them go on to big D1 programs. I don't even know if most of them, but some of them go on to big D1 programs. And another kid in that group just came back. And we've been working with him for, I don't know, not quite a year back yet. And so we're just coming up. He's getting rolling he had a tournament last weekend in the summer where the goal was like, which I still try and wrap my head around this with wrestlers. The goal was like, all right, we got to get weight on before we have to go qualify our weight, which then we're going to try and cut down. Don't get me going on that. But for him, like in the summer, his training based on what his coach wanted and what his parents were saying and he was saying, his training looked very different. It was really built around getting strong, getting big. And then it was like, all right, sitting down and looking at the season and then being like, okay, we need to get more energy system development going. We got to do things to get his weight right as we get closer, which had I known that they were going to try and do the cut that they wanted to do, I would have approached things very differently. Basically, they said he was going to be competing at this weight. And then there was like, well, he is, but he's also going to qualify so that he could go down to this if he wants to. And I'm like, what are we doing? But yeah, so with him, it absolutely changes. Now that he's in season, he went from training, I was writing him programs for 5 to 6 days a week, to right now he's on a program that's set for 2 to 3 days a week. And it's much more just like stimulate and keep his strength up, and the volume that they wrestle those guys, I'm not really that concerned about his conditioning. And then lots of our, like, helping guys get ready for selection and stuff. Todd, you know, I work with a dude that hunts. Todd just did his own programming, getting ready for a hunt. Yeah, it's going to look, I'll say very different, but only in that it's the main difference is like specific readiness for whatever it is that people need to go do. So everything that we just talked about and looked at is a very general physical preparation approach. And so I know I'm kind of giving you a vague answer, but it's just like the next step.
It's a vague question.
For most of our clients, that's where they live.
Yeah.
And then they come to us. Actually, I mean, here's a good example. Then this girl, Laura, comes to us and she says, hey, I'm going to go hike the Grand Canyon rim to rim. I don't remember how many miles it is. It's a lot. And so all of a sudden, very specific goal. But in the grand scheme, not a ton changed. We just did more specific prep for that goal. She had some high intensity, continuous training. Her aerobic work outside of here started to look very different. She upped her mileage, obviously, getting ready for that. And then guys getting ready for selection for like law enforcement, military guys we work with. The one dude, Adam, that I kind of alluded to earlier, like his general setup still looks the same, but it's like he has these specific things within the parameters of the selection that he has to be ready for. So there's more specific prep in his programming. So.
Okay. And then this one might be a little bit more specific maybe for next week, like when we talk about exercise selection, but like I'm a jiu-jitsu player, and then I hope to maybe write some programs for jiu-jitsu players as well. And grip comes into it, you know, so, you know, we're getting kind of the conditioning during the training, but also like a lot of grip fatigue. And so then when we work into the strength work, do you have different considerations for that type of individual?
Are you saying your concern is them pre-fatiguing their grip here, or you want to improve
or
their
like
grip?
No, pre-fatiguing, like that, you know, if I'm having them do heavy deadlifts and then the next day they're also going to go in and do, you know, gi work for 2 or 3 hours, that I don't know, I'm worried about like a tendonitis or something like that. Like, do you think about that differently at all?
On a case-by-case basis, yes. I mean, we're attached to an MMA gym. I've worked with so many grapplers over the years. Case by case, absolutely. I mean, it could be that for some of those guys who are training at like a higher volume, and I mean like their jits and their grappling, like,
yeah,
then maybe it's that we're actually going to have them strap up for their deads and
okay.
But that's not like a blanket prescription. And I'm thinking of like right now we have one dude that's getting ready for a fight, and it's just that we're not crushing him at like most of his work. Now that we're into like specific prep with him being weeks out from a fight, his grip isn't really getting taxed because most of his work is more on that like explosive end with his lifting. And even though we're doing some conditioning, we're not doing very much because at this point he's just scaled up that much more on his specific prep on the fight side. So, but if we did need to spare someone's grip, I mean, yeah, use straps where it applies.
It just for like the general jiu-jitsu player, like somebody who's training 2-3 days a week, are you viewing that activity as a conditioning activity? And then
it depends on the program they're in. Meaning,
you mean which, like what gym they're in?
Meaning, yeah, for jits, like just from the multiple like programs that I've helped guys under, like guys who are under Helson Gracie, worked with a lot of guys who are under Galval with Tony Passos. We've worked with I don't know, but there's just different, like somewhere it's like most days are going to be very technique based and like lower intensity rolls. Like those guys are going to be able to handle more conditioning. And then there's other programs where it's like every day is a war and you're like, all right, we got to take this into account. So for those, what I have guys do, and this is for the wrestlers as well, like the kid that I'm talking about earlier, Gene, was like, when he first came back, I was like, let's talk about right now, like what does your schedule look like? And he's like, oh, it's like kind of like, I'm like, no, not kind of, like go to the whiteboard and write down exactly what you do, right? And so then he writes down the practices. I'm like, okay, so walk me through a practice. Like, how much of it is like smash, like wrestling, and how much of it is technique? And then just start to get an idea on their stress, and then you can kind of gauge for that. So regardless of what program they're under, what I really mean by that is just like the approach of that instructor, how much of the time is spent like at a conditioning level with their training. So
Sure. Okay. That makes sense. And it matters like what classes they're selecting too, if they're going to like advanced no gi versus like basic gi and stuff. Okay.
Yeah. Just thinking of like
okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Cool.
Awesome.
Anything else?
Man, I think that's good. Yeah. All set.
I don't know. Roni,
Hi, Chris. How are you?
what's up, man? I don't know how you guys raise your hand. It comes up for me and I never knew, like, I don't know how you do that. But what's up?
There's an option here that says raise your hand and you just touch the button.
That's awesome.
It's not related to everything I've learned. It's about the training that I'm doing. I don't know what a cluster is. I look for it. Understand that I was doing today my deadlifting.
Oh yeah.
And I suppose that I have to do like the first 2 reps and then rest.
Yes.
Like for 10 seconds, or I don't know how many more seconds. I don't know if put more weight on the bar.
Nope. Yeah, you're so 2 things. One, I'm pointing at the whiteboard, like you can see what I'm pointing at, but I'm going to post that ebook, You Can't Get Bored. And it's fully laid out in there, but all that clusters are, and we're going to get into this next week in loading types, but I'll still give you the answer now, is it's also referred to as a rest pause. It's a way to increase the intensity. So the example you're talking about is 4 repetitions, 2, then 1, then 1.
Yep.
It allows us to pick a weight that at the end of the 2, we're like, okay, yeah, I probably could have gotten, say it's an RPE 8, I probably could have gotten 2 more quality reps. But we rest for a second to make sure that like that, you know, we're still able to like smoke the bar. Okay, then we do 1 more rest for, you know, maybe 3 breaths. Don't get hung up on the time. It's just kind of shake things out and go back to it. No longer than 30 seconds. But you don't change the weight, and it just allows you to use a weight that you wouldn't have been able to use at that RPE if you did those 4 reps continuously. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's true. I use a way that I'm not used to do it, or it can be both. I'm getting stronger, or you know, it was too light for me. It was a good training, but I didn't know how to properly do it, so I wanted to ask.
Yep.
So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And again, I'll post that link to that ebook and make sure there's a whole bunch of those types of things laid out in there, and we'll talk about some of them next week. So.
Okay. Cool. Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Just one more real quick. Like, if I've got somebody that's doing like kind of a lot of mountain athletes here in Utah, and we're going to be doing like hard hikes, long hikes and stuff, would you have them doing more like, let's say Monday's the lift and then Tuesday's that long hike, or more like that high-low idea where I'm going to do both hard things on the one day and then I'm going to drop down and do a much easier thing the next day?
Oh, I mean, how many days a week are they hiking?
I don't know. A lot of people are getting in 2-3.
There's a lot of ways that we could approach it. If it was gonna be like a longer, like casual, go out, enjoy the hike, that would fall, like looking at the example I had up of like the neural metabolic, like across the week. If it's gonna be like leisurely for a long amount of time, go do that on like Saturday, Sunday, right? That more
cardiac output. Yeah.
If it's not that you would do this with hiking, but if it was gonna be something where they're going out on like a shorter, you know, but it's gonna be a little bit more of an intense hike. I mean, yeah, they could, depending on like what their schedule looks like, as long as their recovery's there, like their nutrition, their sleep, everything, they could double up on some of those harder days. And depending on how they're recovering from everything, you could also do that like on a Tuesday. I would just be careful where you're saying there's like 3 of them, crushing yourself, you know, lifting on Monday, crush yourself Tuesday, lift on Wednesday, crush yourself Thursday, lift on Friday. So it could even be looking at it and saying like, what's the overall goal? There's no magic in those 3 days a week of lifting. That's really like, if someone has a fat loss goal, okay, and they can afford to be here 3 days a week, we should push towards that, and they have the time. But maybe that person can get away with really just like 1 day of strength training and some, 1 to 2 days of strength training and some energy system work the rest of the week and get out and hike, depends on why we're doing it. So.
Yeah, I just didn't know if you had a strong preference on like having like like a full big rest day as opposed to like kind of more moderate work throughout the week. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Personally, I don't. I'd actually be interested. Can do me a favor? Will you post that in the open forum? I'd be curious. I'd like to get Todd to jump in on that.
Okay.
And I'd just be curious what some other people say. But I've seen people do well with both, and that's why I say like, and also to be honest with you, so few of our clients kind of fall underneath that.
Yeah.
I just don't do that enough to be able to say, hey, historically, here's what I've done, and it's worked well with a ton of people. I can only really speak to some one-off things, so it'd be cool to get some other brains on that. But
Cool.
All
righty, man.
Awesome. All right, guys. I will get the recap. This video is almost 3 hours. This is going to take forever to render, but I'm gonna try and get this up by tomorrow morning. I've got the Joe Ken talk, warming up with weights blog, the weekly goals blog, like the different phases, the weeks of training, Mike Robertson's aerobic article, modified Cooper's information, the ebook, and post that metabolic workout. I'm sure there'll be some other stuff too, but so this and lots of bonuses coming. If you guys need anything, post away. We'll get taken care of.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you guys. See you later.